LoveLore Library. Chapter 125. The Emperor nervously wiped the cold sweat off his face and forced a smile. Prince Zhongshuan, what are you talking about? The peace talks are a good thing that both Yen and Zhou are looking forward to. Why would I be dissatisfied? If you are not dissatisfied, why would your Majesty of Dian make such a big scene today? If this king didn't happen to meet you, I'm afraid that your country's imperial tutor's wife would have died. This king doesn't care about how many people your country killed, but you killed the family of the official in charge of the peace talks. This king can't help but think about it. This king is a rough person and can't analyze the twists and turns in this matter. It's inevitable that your Majesty of Dian will make a decision. Pang Shao was someone who had seen blood on his hands, so his fierce eyes were naturally different. The Emperor was used to being flattered and had never seen someone who dared to release killing intent towards him. How could he take it? He was so scared that he was covered in cold sweat and his inner clothes were soaked. His stomach was growling and he faintly felt like he wanted to go to the toilet. Pang Shao looked at the Emperor's cowardly appearance with disdain and sneered. How dare you? Yu Yen couldn't take it anymore. He strode forward and said in a deep voice, Your Majesty is just a prince. How dare you be so arrogant in front of our Dian Emperor? How can an outsider interfere with the matters of our Yen dynasty? TSK, the Crown Prince is full of pride. You are so aggressive, it seems like it's also your Emperor's idea. Pang Shao crossed his arms and looked down at them condescendingly. This king is indeed just a prince and can't interfere with your country's methods of killing loyal people. However, this king's tiger army is under the command of this king. Threat. This was a clear threat. Yu Yan's white face was red with anger. He wanted to argue, but the Emperor slapped him fiercely in the face. How dare you? I'm still here, is it your turn to speak? He turned to Pang Shao and smiled apologetically, this is all a misunderstanding. Prince Zhongshuan, please don't mind it. Yu Yen covered his face and looked at the Emperor in disbelief. His eyes were full of hurt and anger. When the onlookers saw this scene, they were filled with righteous indignation and started whispering to each other. Pang Shao raised an eyebrow at Yu Yen and snorted. The Emperor saw that Pang Shao did not say anything. He had already admitted defeat in public, but the other party was still not willing to give him a way out. Then, he heard the buzz of the common people's voices. He felt as if he had been stripped naked and paraded through the streets. He could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. However, there was nothing he could do about people like Pang Shao. The Empress understood the Emperor's intentions. She smiled charmingly and said, Prince Zhongshuan, you may not know, but what happened today, get lost. Did this king ask you? And who the hell are you? The Empress widened her eyes in disbelief. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears as she looked at the Emperor with grievance. The Emperor's expression was already very ugly. He seemed to be explaining, but also reprimanding, this is my Empress, Lady Chao. A hen leads the mourning, but only the rope of the family. Is there no man left in your country? You actually make the harem jump up and down. Pang Shao said disdainfully. The Emperor was so angry that his face turned green. However, he pretended not to care because of fear. Although the onlookers did not like Pang Shao's arrogant behavior, his words of reprimanding the incapable ruler inexplicably made them feel good. Pang Shao said all the things that they wanted to say but did not dare to say. It was really satisfying to see the incapable ruler and the demon empress being angry but not daring to say anything. The Emperor took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He smiled and said, actually, what happened today was a test for Minister Qin and his wife. Minister Qin and the Sun clan are deeply in love. Now, the Empress and I are very gratified and feel that their love is very touching. It just so happens that Prince Zhongshuan is also here and can be my witness." The Emperor turned around and saw that the Sun clan was still tied up. He angrily reprimanded, "Hurry up and untie Madame Qin." Immediately, someone walked up quickly and removed the rag that was blocking the Sun clan's mouth. Then, they cut the rope. Qin Huaiyuan draped his dark gray cloak over the Sun clan's shoulders. He tidied her hair and sighed. The Sun clan stretched her neck and looked behind Pang Shao. Seeing that Qin Yining was still unconscious, she was so worried that tears flowed down her face. "Master, Sister Yi," Qin Huaiyuan put his index finger to his lips and made a shushing gesture, indicating for her to speak later. The Sun clan nodded and followed Qin Huaiyuan to the Emperor. They knelt down and bowed. The Emperor said with satisfaction, "Grand Preceptor Qin has done a meritorious deed during the peace talks. You and Madame Qin are deeply in love. Today, Grand Preceptor Qin will be conferred the title of Marquis of Anping, which will be hereditary. Madame Qin will be conferred the title of first-rank Madam of Anping. This subject thanks your Majesty for your great kindness." Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan kowtowed together. The common people also began to discuss. What exactly was the Emperor trying to do? First, he wanted to kill someone else's wife. Then, he said that he wanted to test their relationship. This was simply bullshit. Now, he was afraid of power and little Wang Yi. He was so afraid that he was about to kneel. Then, he hurriedly conferred Qin Huaiyuan the title of Marquis of Anping, which will be hereditary. This sounded like a great favor, but everyone knew that Qin Huaiyuan still didn't have a legitimate son. There were even rumors that Qin Huaiyuan had no hope of having an heir. What hereditary title? Who was he going to give it to? If he really wanted to be praised, he might as well be conferred the title of Duke. The common people were full of criticism and whispered in low voices. The Emperor couldn't hear the buzzing discussion clearly, but he also felt that it wasn't anything good. Today's plan had been completely ruined by this boorish man in front of him. Unfortunately, he was the Emperor, so he couldn't show any dissatisfaction. The Emperor had a belly full of anger that had nowhere to vent, but he still had to put on a smile in front of Pang Shao. "Prince Zhongshuan has arrived. We have already ordered people to set up a banquet." Pang Shao waved his hand and interrupted the Emperor, "There's no hurry. Young Miss Qin fainted because she was worried about her mother's life or death. This king is worried. He will only be in the mood to do other things after seeing her get better." The Emperor's face turned purple from choking. He didn't dare to do anything, so he could only nod and laugh dryly, "Of course, of course. Sure enough, even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women." Ha! Pang Shao was too lazy to pay attention to old dog Yuqi. He turned around to check on Qin Yining's situation. Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan also saluted the Emperor and bid him farewell. The Emperor gave Qin Huaiyuan a look. Qin Huaiyuan understood and stepped forward. "What orders does your Majesty have?" The Emperor said in a low voice, "If that evil embryo likes her, you know what to do." Qin Huaiyuan looked at the Emperor in shock and said anxiously, "Your Majesty, this official plotted to kill Zhao Zhongzheng and has a grudge against Prince Zhongshuan. He also pestered this official's daughter in every possible way. Who knows what intentions he has? How can this official send my beloved daughter to the hands of my enemy? You want to defy the imperial decree." The Emperor heard Qin Huaiyuan's words and dispelled his suspicion of treason. "This official does not dare." Qin Huaiyuan saluted. Only then was the Emperor satisfied. He returned to the carriage with the aggrieved Empress. Yu Qiyan, who had heard everything clearly, looked at the Emperor's back and then looked at Qin Huaiyuan, whose face was filled with worry. Under the discussion of the common people, she only wished that there was a hole in the ground that she could crawl into. Imperial tutor, this official will go back first. Yu Yen awkwardly turned around and left. Qin Huayuan waited until the emperor, empress, and crown prince had walked far away before he put away his anxious and helpless expression. He stood up straight and calmly stared in the direction of the emperor's departure. At this time, the Sun clan had already run in front of Qin Yining. She held her unconscious daughter in her arms and sobbed, "Sister Yi, don't scare mother. I kept shaking my head at you. I wanted to tell you that they didn't really want to kill me, but they blocked my mouth. Sister Yi, wake up." Chapter 126. When Qin Huayuan heard the Sun clan's words, he knelt down with a frown and patted her shoulder to comfort her. When the Sun clan saw that it was Qin Huayuan, she leaned into his arms and sobbed. When Pang Xiao saw Qin Huayuan's expression, she became even more confused. Qin Huayuan worriedly asked Bing Tang, "Miss Tang, how is Sister Yi?" "Master, madam, don't worry. Miss is fine. She just fainted because of anger and exhaustion. This servant has already performed acupuncture on Mississippi. She should be fine." Bing Tang held Qin Yining's hand and continuously massaged the acupuncture points on her fingers and the web between her thumb and forefinger. The people from the warden's office in the 5 cities had already evacuated the onlookers. Only Qin Huayuan's family and the dozen or so Tiger Army soldiers that Pang Xiao brought were left in front of the Meridian Gate. Just now, there were many people, so they didn't feel it. Now, the wind suddenly blew, making people's faces feel cold. The weather is still cold. Why don't we find a quiet place nearby to settle Miss Qin down so that she won't catch a cold? Pang Xiao thought for a moment and said, "I remember that there is a restaurant in Zhao Yun Agency nearby." Bing Tang nodded and said, "Last night, Miss stayed at Gue Lin Lu. Master, madam, why don't we settle down at Gue Lin Lu for the time being?" When Pang Xiao thought about the temperament of the family Qin people, she guessed most of what Qin Yining had experienced. Her heart felt like it was being pinched by someone, and she felt a dull pain. This king has really learned something. The family Qin can't even accommodate a girl. Only then did the Sun clan remember that the one who spoke was the cold-blooded little Wang Yi. When she thought about how close he was to Qin Yining just now, she cried even harder. Qin Huayuan frowned and looked at Pang Xiao. Young Miss broke out. In front of Qin Huayuan, Bing Tang was not in a position to talk about the people in the main family's mansion. He just said this lightly and helped Qin Yining up with Song Lan. They walked to the side of the carriage. The Sun clan also hurried to help. Qin Huayuan was a smart man. How could he not understand? When the child was brought back from the mountains, his face was still rosy and full of vitality. But now, he had been tormented to such an extent. Seeing that the Sun clan, Song Lan, and Bing Tang worked together to place Qin Yining in the carriage, Qin Huayuan sighed softly. He turned around and cupped his hands to Pang Xiao. "What's little Wang Ye's plan now? This king will naturally go with you. We'll talk about other things after her condition improves." Qin Huayuan frowned when he heard this. He was a man. Naturally, he understood men's thoughts. His daughter was beautiful and had a likable personality. If the person who took a fancy to her was someone else, even if it was someone like the crown prince who was not very useful in politics, Qin Huayuan would not feel disgusted. But Pang Xiao was not the same. Pang Xiao's father, the former Beiji Protector General Zhong Zhongjing, died because of his plan to sow discord between them. This official appreciates Prince Zhongshuan's kindness. I also thank Wang Yi on behalf of Sister Yi. However, Sister Yi is an unmarried woman after all. Men and women should be cautious. Besides, the emperor has already prepared a banquet to entertain Wang Yi. Why don't Wang Yi do his business? Pang Shao sneered. Now, her safety is this king's business. Grand Preceptor Qin doesn't need to say anything more. Or does Grand Preceptor Qin want to defy the emperor's decree? Pang Shao took 2 steps forward. He raised the corner of his lips and said threateningly, "This king remembers that your majesty just ordered Grand Preceptor Qin to do something. If Grand Preceptor Qin doesn't listen, this king can only inform your majesty." The atmosphere that could be considered harmonious just a moment ago had now turned into a state of mutual hostility, imminent. The Sun Clan, Bing Tang, and Song Lan beside the carriage saw this and nervously gathered around. However, they did not dare to say anything. Qin Huaiyuan remained calm in such a frightening atmosphere. After a while, he slowly opened his mouth. "Little Wang Yi is a peerless hero. I admire men like Wang Yi the most. Although Wang Ye's hands are stained with blood, he never kills innocent people. Back in Shihua City, Wang Yi refused to massacre the city and was ordered by your majesty to remove him from the position of marshal. Wang Yi would rather resist the edict and risk his life for the sake of innocent people. On behalf of the people of Shihua City, I thank Wang Yi for not killing me." As Qin Huaiyuan spoke, he bowed to Pang Shao. The tense atmosphere just now had been resolved by his actions. The people around were shocked by Qin Huaiyuan's words. The Sun Clan, Bing Tang, and Song Lan did not expect that Pang Shao, who killed without batting an eyelid, was removed from the position of marshal because he did not want to kill the people of Shihua City. Pang Shao looked at Qin Huaiyuan with a complicated expression. Not only did Qin Huaiyuan sincerely express his gratitude, but he also revealed his background to Pang Shao. He was telling Pang Shao that he had spies in Dezhou and that the status of spies was not low. What did Qin Huaiyuan want by revealing his trump card like this? Qin Huaiyuan straightened up and said, "You and I are both men. The grudges between men should not affect the family. Back then, I schemed against your father and indirectly caused his tragic death. It was because we were in different positions that I had no choice but to do so. Little Wang Yi, if you hate me and want to take revenge, you can come at me. However, as a father, I implore you again, little Wang Yi, not to hurt my daughter. She has led a wandering life since she was young and has suffered a lot. She is truly innocent." In front of the 2 armies, little Wang Yi was willing to take a risk and do a benevolent and righteous act for someone unrelated to you. Now, little Wang Yi, please let go of the innocent and do not involve Sister Yi in this. After Qin Huaiyuan finished speaking, he saluted again. Qin Huaiyuan's sincere words made the Sun Clan burst into tears. Bing Tang and Song Lan also had tears in their eyes. Even Huzi and the other hot-blooded men behind Pang Shao couldn't help but be moved. Although Qin Huaiyuan was as cunning as a fox and had harmed Wang Ye's father, he was still a person with a true temperament. Pang Shao, on the other hand, was filled with anger after being moved. So in Grand Preceptor Qin's eyes, this king is such a despicable person. If this king wanted to take revenge, you would have died countless times. Do you really think your life is so tough? I don't think that way. Pang Shao sneered and took 2 steps forward. He stared at Qin Huaiyuan with his hawk-like sharp eyes and said without backing down. Grand Preceptor Qin doesn't have the right to decide who this king likes. Qin Huaiyuan also didn't avoid looking at Pang Shao. After a moment, he suddenly smiled and nodded. Since that's the case, let's go to Qilin Tower first. As he spoke, he turned around and strode toward the carriage, looking as if he was in a hurry to send his daughter to a place to settle down. Pang Shao looked at Qin Huaiyuan's back and sneered. He finally understood where Qin Yining's strength came from. He was so angry that his heart itched, but he couldn't slap her. Her intelligence and wisdom were all inherited from her father. "Master, are we going to Qilan Tower?" Huzi came forward and asked. Pang Shao nodded and pulled his beloved horse over. The rest of the tiger army also got on their horses and followed Pang Shao behind the family Qin's carriage. Huzi then urged his horse closer to Pang Shao and asked in a low voice, "Wang Yi, I just received a secret report from Jinghu Wei. Your Majesty has sent Lian Xingjie as an envoy to Dian. He should arrive in 2 days. If we arrive first, won't the Dian people think that you are pretending to be an envoy?" Pang Shao said indifferently, "Let them be. What can they do to me?" Huzi could only nod helplessly. His Wang Yi was usually so calm, but he was so abnormal in front of Miss Qin. It was as if all his impulses were used on one person. Chapter 127. Qin Yining felt like a small fish floating in the water. The river water was warm and clear after being bathed by the sun. She threw away all her worries and swam around freely without any worries. She didn't remember who she was or where she was going. After some time, the water became shallower and shallower, and a pair of large hands scooped her up. The person raised the corner of his lips and held her in front of him with clear almond-shaped eyes. She seemed to hear someone calling her, "Xiaoxi, Xiaoxi, little rabbit, little rabbit." Qin Yining suddenly became angry. Her name was Xiaoxi, but she was now Qin Yining. Who was Little Rabbit? The sudden anger made all the memories come back to her. Thinking of her mother on the execution ground, Qin Yining suddenly opened her eyes and sat up in shock. "Mother! Miss, you're awake. Sister Yi, do you feel better?" Qin Yining looked at her mother, who was sitting by the bed and holding her hand, and her father, who was looking at her with concern. Then she looked at the unfamiliar room. Before she could react to the situation in front of her, the Sun clan had already hugged her. "Sister Yi, you're finally awake. Do you know that you've been unconscious for an entire day?" "Mother." Qin Yining slowly raised her arms and hugged the Sun clan. She felt that she must be dreaming. Her mother was cold to her most of the time. When had she ever been so gentle to her? Qin Yining leaned her face against the Sun clan's shoulder. If this was a dream, then let this dream be a little longer. Qin Huaiyuan and Pang Shao, who were watching from the side, felt sad for her. She was so careful and cherishing that she couldn't believe it. Pang Shao frowned and wondered how much the Sun clan's mother had mistreated this silly girl. Qin Huaiyuan couldn't help but stroke her head with his large hand. Qin Yining felt that something was wrong. How could the touch in a dream be so clear? Her mother's embrace was so warm that the few drops of warm tears that fell on her neck had already turned cold. Her father's hand that touched her forehead was warm and real. There were also Pang Shao, Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Huzi, who were smiling at him. She came back to her senses and said in surprise, "Mother, you're fine." It's okay." The Sun clan member touched Qin Yining's cheek. "Do you feel better?" "I'm fine. Jiraiya is fine." "That's good. I was scared to death when I saw you faint. Mother, you scared me. I thought I would never see you again," Qin Yining said as tears welled up in his eyes. However, she forced a smile and didn't let her tears fall down. She looked at Qin Huaiyuan and said, "Father must have come to save Mother. Otherwise, if the executioner wanted to kill the criminal, even if Pang Shao was there, he would still do it." Qin Huaiyuan said with shame, "It was little Wang Yi who saved your mother. Father had been in the palace with the emperor and didn't have a chance to come out." He lowered his eyes and played with the bowl in his hand. He sighed and said, "I don't know the details. The emperor had me stay in the imperial study and said that he wanted to chat with me. He didn't let me go back. As for what happened at the execution ground, I didn't know until I arrived." So, the so-called palace banquet didn't start. Qin Huaiyuan shook his head and lowered his eyes, not looking at Qin Yining. Qin Yining frowned and pondered. The emperor used the family Qin to set up a trap. But why did the emperor do this? Everything was going well, but he kidnapped his mother and escorted her to the execution ground. He even threatened to show her to the public. At first glance, it was obvious that he set up a big trap and wanted to test someone. When Qin Yining thought of this, he was suddenly shocked. The emperor didn't really want to kill his mother. If the people she arranged really went to the execution ground, what would happen? The emperor must have secretly sent more people. She only found 4 people, and it was uncertain whether she could successfully escape. If these 4 people were arrested and the emperor's people found out that she was the mastermind, then the entire family Qin might. Qin Yining was so scared that his back was covered in cold sweat. At this moment, she was extremely grateful to Pang Xiao for arriving in time and messing up the situation. Otherwise, she was afraid that her impulsive actions this time would have really caused a disaster for the family Qin. And her father. Qin Yining looked at his father in horror and muttered, "Father, after your peace talk, did the emperor's attitude toward you change? Shouldn't we restrain ourselves?" The emperor's actions this time might be to test Qin Huaiyuan. Perhaps he suspected that Qin Huaiyuan had the intention to betray the country. Qin Huaiyuan looked at Qin Yining with a complicated expression. There were some things that he couldn't tell her in the Sun clan, so he could only let Qin Yining guess on his own. Qin Huaiyuan felt sorry for Qin Yining and the Sun clan, but he was afraid that some things would cause even more trouble if he told them. He could only sigh softly and say, "Sister Yi, you don't have to worry. Father will take care of these things. Now that you're awake and we've returned to the capital, I haven't returned home yet. Why don't we pack up and return home?" Qin Yining knew that Qin Huaiyuan must have his own difficulties, so he didn't pursue the matter. Thinking of the Dowager Duchess's face, Qin Yining shook his head and said, "Father, you can return home first. However, I won't go back with my mother so easily." Qin Huaiyuan was stunned and asked in confusion, "Sister Yi, what do you mean?" Qin Yining smiled, but his smile was uglier than crying. Chapter 128. Qin Huaiyuan looked deeply at Qin Yining, as if he was scrutinizing something. The aura he inadvertently revealed made people feel pressured. The Sun clan's heart trembled. She turned her head and said worriedly, "Sister Yi, why don't we listen to your father? We'll go back with him. I've been living in the palace for a while, so I can go back and pay respects to the old madam." Qin Yining looked at the Sun clan with pity. Her mother had been in the palace for many days, so she didn't know about the old madam's heartlessness. She treated the old madam as her mother-in-law, but the old madam only treated her as an outsider. The old madam was selfish and heartless to the extreme. However, Qin Yining didn't want to tell the Sun clan about this. The Sun clan wasn't good at enduring. In the future, she would have to return to the Fu to live. If the Sun clan knew everything, how could she face the old madam calmly? Therefore, Qin Yining only shook her head. "I hope father and mother can forgive your daughter's willfulness. It's not that I don't respect the old madam, but in order to not be bullied in the Fu in the future, I can only do this." Seeing that Qin Yining restrained herself and didn't tell the Sun clan about the Fu, Qin Huaiyuan could vaguely guess a thing or two. "Father understands. You and your mother can stay here for the time being." Qin Huaiyuan sighed and stood up, saying, "Father will investigate when I return to the Fu." "Thank you, father." Qin Yining smiled gratefully. The dimples on her cheeks were very cute and lovable. Qin Huaiyuan couldn't help but smile. "You and your mother should take good care of yourselves." "Master." The Sun clan glanced at Qin Yining helplessly, then stood up to send Qin Huaiyuan off. "I'll persuade Sister Yi. I'll go back soon." Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded. Sister Yi has her own ideas. You can take good care of her. The Sun clan sent Qin Huayuan off before returning to their room. Qin Yining had already ordered the servants to prepare exquisite and delicious side dishes. After having a simple dinner with the Sun clan, he went to bed with the Sun clan after washing up. The mother and daughter chatted casually. Qin Yining only talked about some interesting things that happened during the peace talks and did not mention anything about the mansion. It was rare for her to be so close to the Sun clan. Now that she was able to speak with her mother in such a peaceful manner, she felt extremely happy. She had been praying for this day ever since she returned to the residence. The joy of Qin Yining infected the Sun clan, and the Sun clan also relaxed. However, he still had doubts in his heart. What did old madam do to make Sister Yi refuse to return to the Fu? Xixiao garden was brightly lit. Brand new and bright palace lanterns hung high under the eaves of the corridors. The blue brick floor that had just been drenched by a drizzle reflected the palace lanterns and the silhouette of the house, making the spacious courtyard look like a celestial palace. Qin Huayuan wore a cloak, and Mammy Qin led the way with a lantern in front. Behind them, two maidservants opened oil paper umbrellas and raised their hands to shield him from the drizzle. The group of people walked quickly to the main room. Mammy Qin smiled and said, "It's good that Lei has returned safely. Old madam will be very happy." Qin Huayuan smiled calmly and didn't say anything. Seeing Qin Huayuan's expression and the fact that he came back alone, Mammy Qin knew to change the topic. The weather is getting warmer. It started to drizzle in the capital 2 days ago. There's already some greenery in our back garden. That's right. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, in the blink of an eye, the spring sun has arrived. After passing through the courtyard and going up the steps, Rui curtsied and carefully lifted the dark green bamboo curtain embroidered with magpies ascending to the branches for Qin Huayuan. The warmth and laughter in the room came out together, but Qin Huayuan didn't reveal a trace of a smile. Rui still wanted to enter the room to serve, but Mammy Qin pulled her and said, "Go tell the small kitchen to prepare eldest Leoi's favorite food first." Rui nodded and smiled gratefully at Mammy Qin before quickly leaving. Mammy Qin stood in the corridor and didn't enter the room. Not to mention that she didn't enter the room, even the other people in the room would come out later. It was better for her not to join in the fun. Qin Huayuan directly entered the room and saw Chao Yuqing, Qin Huaining, and the sixth young miss surrounding the old madam. They were either standing or sitting and chatting with her. Seeing her return, Chao Yuqing, Qin Huaining, and the sixth young miss all stood up and bowed. The old madam happily got off the arhat bed and grabbed Qin Huayuan's hand. "Meng Gu is back. It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." Qin Huayuan bowed to the old madam and then sized her up. Seeing that the old madam's complexion was rosy and her complexion was normal, he said, "Mother, how have you been?" "Good, good, I was just worried about you. Look, you've lost a lot of weight after going out. Let's go back and make up for it." She then smiled at Chao Yuqing. "Just now, Yuqing and I were talking about what your favorite food is. Yuqing also said that the weather is getting warm, so she should prepare summer clothes for you." Because it was time-consuming to make clothes, the Fu's clothes had to be prepared every other season. Qin Huayuan faintly glanced at Chao Yuqing and said, "You don't need to worry. Eldest madam will take care of this matter." This was to remind Chao Yuqing that she was only a concubine and shouldn't exceed her authority. Hearing this, Chao Yuqing's smile faded and her pink face turned white, but she still maintained her smile. "It's not troublesome. Doing these things was originally this concubine's duty." Duty? Qin Huayuan helped the old madam sit down on the mahogany arhat bed with a brand new light blue bedding. He chuckled softly, "I thought that your duties were in the palace and not in the manor." Chao Yuqing's complexion had already turned from white to red. Her beautiful eyes angrily looked at Qin Huayuan, as if she didn't understand why Qin Huayuan suddenly gave her food. But in just a breath, she humbly and respectfully bowed, "Laoi, please calm down." When the old madam saw that her son actually dared to treat Chao Shi like this, she was so anxious that her face turned white. This was Chao Shi, Empress Chao's older sister, the eldest daughter of the father-in-law of Chao. She repeatedly signaled Qin Huayuan with her eyes, but Qin Huayuan seemed to not see it and could still sit down leisurely to drink tea. The old madam felt stifled and could only personally help Chao Yuqing to sit down on the embroidered stool at the side. "Good child, don't mind him. He's being muddle-headed. I'll talk to him." Just as she finished speaking, Qin Huayuan spoke first. "You all leave first. I have something to say to the old madam." Qin Huaining and 6 Xiaojia, who were silent like cicadas in winter, hurriedly bowed and left as if they had been pardoned. Chao Yuqing hesitantly glanced at Qin Huayuan and stood to leave. Soon, there was no one else in the room. The old madam looked at Chao Shi's aggrieved appearance and said anxiously, "Meng Gu, what are you doing? You just came back and you already gave Yuqing a look." "A look? She's this son's concubine. She did something like deceiving the mistress into the palace. This son hasn't directly taught her a lesson and only said a few words indirectly. Can't I say anything? Don't forget, her surname is Chao. Her surname is Qin now." The old madam pointed at Qin Huayuan and said, "You scoundrel child, don't forget what kind of people her younger sister and father are. If you don't deal with these two people, what will you do in the future? This son knows that mother is worried about this son and dotes on this son." Qin Huayuan helped the old madam to sit down again and refilled the old madam's tea. "However, mother, please understand that this son is also a husband and a father." Qin Huayuan didn't say much. The old madam's expression changed a few times, and she angrily cursed, "I just knew that it must be that slut from the Sun clan and that little bastard Qin Yining who instigated it behind the scenes. What did they say about me?" The more she thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. The old madam choked with sobs. "The Sun clan dared to provoke the imperial power, and that precious daughter of yours actually went to save them. That kind of unruly and stupid woman, it's good that she's dead. She won't implicate you. I'm your mother, the old mistress of this family. Could it be that I can let a stinky fish from the Sun clan stir up a pot of soup? Mother, please calm down." Qin Huayuan lowered his head and said, "Mother's love for this son is the same as this son's love for Sister Yi. Mother probably forgot that when grandmother made things difficult for you in every way possible, and when father favored the concubine and neglected the wife, raising that Jiang clan up high, how you washed your face with tears and how your son did it." When the old madam heard this, she was angry, but it also evoked the sadness of her youth. She recalled how Qin Huayuan protected her when she was young. What mother hated the most in the past was grandmother's unkindness and short-sightedness. But now, look at yourself. What's the difference between you and grandmother? You unfilial son. Didn't I do all this for you? For this son, then mother, please take good care of this son's reputation. This son can't bear the reputation of being ungrateful and spoiling the concubine while neglecting the wife. This son has already reached the top of the court, and now I have a noble title. With the fate of the Dayan nation, this son has already reached the peak. There's no more hope for this son. This son has always been upright and upright. I only hope that no one will criticize and insult me. This son begs mother not to make decisions on your own." Good. Good. You think I'm unnecessary. Mother knows what I'm talking about. Why do you have to change the topic? Qin Huayuan looked straight at the old madam and said, "Sister Yi and the Sun clan are temporarily living outside. This son doesn't care. Mother, do as you see fit." As for Chao Clan, mother doesn't know the inside story between this son and her. Please don't interfere. After Qin Huaiyuan finished speaking, he bowed and turned to leave. Looking at his back, the old madam's tears streamed down. This unfilial son, unfilial son. What kind of sin have I committed? In the corridor, Mammy Qin, Ji Xiang, and Rui bowed to Qin Huaiyuan and ordered someone to hold an umbrella for Qin Huaiyuan to send him off. Mammy Qin took a breath of the cold, damp air, patted her cheeks, and adjusted her expression. Only then did she enter the room to comfort the old madam. Although Qin Huaiyuan and the old madam had dismissed the bystanders, there was no wall that didn't have a crack. Soon, the second branch and the third branch learned of the news. The second madam and the third madam had long been displeased with the old madam's fawning. When they heard the news, they couldn't help but rejoice in her misfortune, regardless of how the people in the Fu secretly discussed it. At this time, in the welcoming pavilion of the Honglu Temple, the official of the Honglu Temple was leading de Zhou's envoy to the main hall. The Lian Xingjie was dressed in casual clothes, and his back was straight. The official of the Honglu Temple said in fear and trepidation, "Your country's Prince Zhongshuan has arrived before you. At this time, he is waiting for you in the reception pavilion for a banquet. This official has prepared an exquisite banquet and our country's unique songs and dances. I hope that you won't dislike them." When he heard that Pang Shao was also present, Lian Xingjie couldn't help but reveal a trace of fear on his face. However, when he thought about Your Majesty's decree, his heart became firm again. The unique songs and dances mentioned by the official of the Honglu Temple made Lian Xingjie's heart ripple. There would be songs and dances. These people wouldn't be rough men, right? He also wouldn't have to worry about being lonely at night. Just as he was thinking, a group of people entered the reception pavilion. Chapter 129. Who else could it be if not this official? Lian Xingjie's answer was full of confidence, but if one listened carefully, one could see how dry his voice was. Pang Shao cast a sidelong glance at his outwardly fierce face and sneered, then ignored him. His slender fingers with distinct joints picked up an exquisite white porcelain wine cup with gold. Immediately, a beautiful female servant with a smile like a flower poured wine for him with a copper pot in hand. The amber wine fell into the wine cup. The color was sparkling and translucent, and the aroma was rich. The female servant's red lips curled slightly. Her gaze carefully lingered on Pang Zhao's handsome face. Her cheeks immediately blushed, and she shyly lowered her eyes. This scene made Lian Xingjie feel envious. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva and quickly walked forward a few steps. Pang Shao didn't care at all. He raised his head and drank the wine in one gulp. His Adam's apple moved, and the strong curve of his jaw added a bit of casual and domineering aura to him. The female servant's cheeks became redder. She prepared to pour more wine, but Pang Shao used his slender fingers to turn the wine cup upside down. He waved his hand to indicate for the servant to withdraw. He cast a sidelong glance at Lian Xingjie and lazily said, "Official Lian must have received Your Majesty's decree. Otherwise, you wouldn't have grown so bold and not saluted when you see this king." Lian Xingjie finally moved his gaze away from the beautiful woman. When he met Pang Zhao's mocking and sharp eyes, his body trembled and he almost knelt down. Cough, this official came by imperial decree. Unlike some people, who came without permission. Lian Xingjie said with extreme apprehension. He was really scared after being beaten. When he saw Pang Shao, his entire body tensed up, and the places on his back that had been beaten began to ache. Pang Shao raised his eyebrows and smiled. He casually pointed to an empty seat. "Sit. Why stand when you speak? This king didn't punish you to stand." Lian Xingjie's face turned red. He was angry, and his timidity decreased a little. He straightened his neck and sat down opposite Pang Shao. Seeing that the two people from Dezhou didn't seem to get along, the minister of Honglu was so nervous that his palms were sweating. He was afraid that the two would fight because of a disagreement. If something like this happened under his watch, the emperor would definitely be angry. Seeing that Lian Xingjie had taken his seat and was no longer speaking, the minister of the Chamberlain of Dependencies let out a sigh of relief. He ordered the several officials accompanying him to take their seats as well, and then ordered the banquet to begin with singing and dancing. The elegant sound of the wind instruments was melodious and pleasing to the ears. The young dancers were dressed in gauze, and their movements were graceful. In the magnificent flower hall, there was a bit of ethereal beauty. In addition, there was a table for 8 with red brocade and peony flowers on it, and there was a jade plate of delicacies and fine wine on it. Lian Xingjie ate delicacies and fine wine, and had beauties serving him. His gaze was fixed on the dancing young girls, and he felt both physically and mentally comfortable. His tense mood instantly relaxed. Pang Shao cast a sidelong glance at Lian Xingjie's foolish appearance. He took the wine pot from the female servant's hand and poured himself a drink. His eyes that were admiring the singing and dancing were extremely cold. It was as if he didn't see this beautiful scene in the slightest. When the minister of Honglu and the other Dian officials saw the completely opposite attitudes of Pang Shao and Lian Xingjie, they each had their own guesses. They didn't dare to participate in the battle between the two and only silently accompanied them. After 3 rounds of wine, Lian Xingjie was completely relaxed. His mood also rose because of the wine. Prince Zhongshuan, you came to Dian without permission. What is the punishment for this? The originally imposing words were spoken with a heavy stutter after he was drunk, and he didn't have any confidence. Pang Shao lazily said, the two countries have successfully negotiated peace and become friendly neighbors. This king is just traveling around. What crime is there? You are twisting words and forcing logic. You are the commander of the Tiger Army. Don't you know the importance of your position? Your Majesty didn't allow you to travel, but you decided on your own. Do you know that you have angered your Majesty? Lian Xingjie was drunk and slammed the table angrily. The singing and dancing suddenly stopped. Everyone was frightened by Lian Xingjie's sudden anger and kept quiet out of fear. The minister of Honglu didn't dare to participate in Dezhou's matter. He quickly got up and waved his hand to lead everyone away. The scene that was singing and dancing a moment ago was now strangely quiet. Pang Shao drank a mouthful of wine and was too lazy to speak. Lian Xingjie saw that Pang Shao didn't speak and sneered, if you don't speak, it means that you are afraid. Let me tell you, Pang Zhishi. I have seen that you have been rampant for a long time. You have always been disrespectful to us, the old officials of Beiji. We have been loyal to your Majesty, but you have been picking on us and beating and scolding us. Fortunately, His Majesty is wise and has seen through your domineering nature. Pang Shao dug his ears. Are you done? His Majesty asked this official to ask you why you didn't return to the capital and came to Dian instead. Why aren't you answering? When a general is outside, he is not subject to military orders. Pang Shao put down the wine jug. The bottom of the brass jug lightly touched the table, making a talk sound. Besides, this king has his own reasons for this king. Lian Xingjie saw that Pang Shao didn't explode and scold him like before. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. So what if he has the Tiger Army's Tiger Tally? So what if the 100,000 Tiger Army is brave and good at fighting and can fight 1 against 10? Even if Pang Shao is a king, he still has to bow down to your Majesty. He is also afraid of the old officials of Beiji and the north settling Marquis Ji Ziyu's Dragon Stallion Army. Not to mention that the Dragon Stallion Army has sufficient military strength. Years ago, when the great Zhou dynasty conquered the lands of northern Ji, Pang Shao led the brave tiger army and slaughtered the vanguard. Even though the officials had already surrendered, Pang Shao still dragged them out and fed them to the dogs. His viciousness had already made the old officials of northern Ji fearful. These people have now submitted to Zhou. In their hearts, Pang Shao was the culprit that caused the destruction of Beiji. How could they not hate Pang Shao? Moreover, Your Majesty is afraid of Pang Zhao's military strength. Ji Ziyu's dragon stallion army is growing stronger day by day. It is a sharp weapon that keeps the tiger army in check. However, Pang Shao doesn't know how to restrain himself. He is still arrogant and makes a scene at every turn. Lian Xingjie, as an official of Beiji who surrendered to Zhou, has already disliked Pang Shao for many days. Now that he saw that Pang Shao only said, when a general is in a foreign country, he will not obey orders. He was so proud that he was about to float. You have been proud for too long. Lian Xingjie laughed and said, Old brother, let me give you a piece of advice. Restrain yourself. Now that you have explained to me properly, I can also put in a few good words for you in the letter to Your Majesty. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't even know how you died. Moreover, it is not me who wants to ask why you came to Dian. It is Your Majesty who wants to ask. As Lian Xingjie spoke, he stood up with his arms on the square table. He leaned over and pretended to listen, but his face was full of mockery. Come. Tell me about it first. Pang Shao kept smiling with his eyes down and played with the golden wine cup in his hand. Huzi, who was beside him, was so angry at Lian Xingjie's proud face that his face turned purple. He wanted to rush up and break Lian Xingjie's neck. Lian Xingjie saw that Pang Shao still didn't speak. He leaned forward and smiled proudly. Why aren't you talking? You said that you have your reasons. Why don't you tell me your reasons? Paw. A crisp sound. Lian Xingjie covered his swollen face in disbelief and looked dazedly at Pang Shao. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to listen to this king? Pang Shao stood up and looked down at Lian Xingjie's pale face. Lian Xingjie was woken up by the slap. Recalling his mocking words, he covered his face and took a few steps back as if he could escape Pang Zhao's attack range. Pang Shao was too lazy to pay attention to him. He turned around and left the flower pavilion with Huzi. Lian Xingjie covered his face and stared at Pang Zhao's back. He roared fiercely, Don't be so arrogant. Sooner or later, you will cry. The scene in the room had been seen clearly by the officials of the Honglu temple who were peeping through the crack in the door. They quietly went to report it to the emperor. The emperor was hugging the empress and sitting on the Arhat bed with bright yellow bedding by the window of the imperial study. Hearing the Honglu temple official's words, the empress smiled charmingly. It seems that Prince Zhongshuan is nothing more than this. The emperor had had enough of Pang Zhao's domineering attitude. He patted the empress's butt and whispered a few words in her ear. The empress continued to act coquettishly for a while. Seeing that the emperor really wanted her to leave, she reluctantly left the imperial study. The emperor smiled as he watched the empress walk away. Only then did his expression become serious. He stood up and said, So, Emperor Zhou is afraid of Pang Zhishi. This humble subject thinks so too. Otherwise, with Meng Zhishi's domineering nature, he definitely wouldn't tolerate Sir Envoy's repeated questioning. Tisk. Zhen knew that this kind of arrogant person wouldn't have a long life even if he was rich. How could he allow others to sleep beside him? Emperor Zhou probably couldn't stand his actions and wanted to suppress him. Otherwise, how could that Lian person dare to be so bold in front of Pang Zhishi? Your Majesty is wise. The Honglu temple official nodded. The emperor waved his hand and dismissed the Honglu temple official. When there was no one around, the emperor sat behind the black wooden desk with a gloomy expression. Thinking back to how his polite greetings to Pang Zhishi were seen by so many commoners and officials, the emperor felt regret. Who knew that Pang Zhishi's position in Dezhou had already been shaken? If he had known, he would have been more unyielding. Even Pang Zhishi couldn't control Emperor Zhou's thoughts. He actually believed Pang Zhishi's threat of war. What a mistake, what a mistake. In a fit of anger, the emperor swept the brush, ink, and paper on the table to the ground. When the guards and eunuchs outside heard the commotion, they frantically rushed in to protect the emperor. Seeing that the emperor had lost his temper, they were slightly relieved. However, they all kept quiet out of fear and didn't dare to go close to persuade him. The emperor's temper had become more and more irritable recently. He often couldn't control himself when he was angry. Last time, the eunuch who was in charge of writing and writing only said a few words of advice and was dragged out to be beaten 20 times. If it wasn't for the eunuch who was in charge of writing and his connections, how could he still be alive now? When the emperor smashed everything that could be smashed, he let out a sigh of relief. Bring me the elixir that Immortal Lu offered. Yes. The eunuch immediately went to fetch an exquisite golden box and presented a jet-black elixir with both hands. The emperor swallowed it with cold wine and immediately felt his entire body relax. He was in a good mood. He laughed and said, "The Empress recommended Immortal Lu very well. Tell the Empress to reward her according to her discretion. Take whatever she needs from my treasury." "Yes. This servant will go now." The eunuch smiled apologetically and bowed. In a low voice, he instructed the eunuchs to quietly clean up the mess on the ground. The emperor thought for a moment and said, "Also, go early tomorrow morning and announce that my grace to the family Qin is not fake. Now that the Sun clan has become a first-rank noble lady, they should be rewarded. I will write a plaque for the family Qin tomorrow. Send it to someone to make it. Also, set up a memorial arch for the Sun clan in front of the family Qin. After you send the reward tomorrow morning, make a trip to the family Qin and inform them." Chapter 130. The emperor personally wrote the words Onping Marquis' mansion. Together with the gift of building the memorial archway for Onping Madam, gold, silver, and jewelry, the next afternoon, the head eunuch personally led people to deliver it to the family Qin. When the old madam received the news, she was eating a cup of almond milk. When she heard the news, she was so happy that she couldn't hold the white porcelain cup and spilled half of the milk. "Quickly, set up the incense table and call the womenfolk of the family to hurry to the front to receive the decree." She turned around and ordered Mammy Qin to help her put on makeup. The jubilant atmosphere of the Qin mansion spread from the backyard to the front yard. The head eunuch was used to changing the helm according to the wind, so he politely delivered the decree and rewards. Seeing that the Sun clan and Qin Yining weren't at home, he asked a question. "Old Qin, why haven't I seen Onping Madam and your family's fourth miss today?" The old madam was stunned and said with a smile, "Thank you for asking. Onping Madam isn't feeling well and needs to recuperate. Coincidentally, my fourth granddaughter has a property outside. She said that it was the most suitable place for recuperating, so she went to serve her mother. Since you came to give the rewards, I didn't have time to bring them back because I was in a hurry." Although the head eunuch was smart and saw the old madam's embarrassment, he didn't dare to offend Qin Huayuan and didn't dare to ask the old madam. "Since that's the case, I ask old Qin to order people to lead the way. The memorial archway can be ordered, but some of the rewards from the emperor and empress were ordered to be given to Onping Madam and fourth miss in person." The old madam hurriedly agreed and looked at Qin Huayuan inquiringly. Qin Huayuan smiled and ordered the first master Qin Yu and the second master Qin Han to lead the way for the head eunuch. The two happily agreed. When the two were about to leave, old Madam didn't forget to instruct Nanny Chin, quickly go and catch up with Brother Yu and Brother Han. Just say my words. Let them lead the way and don't be in a hurry to come back. It's important to bring their eldest aunt and cousin back as well. Hearing this, Mammy Chin felt that this matter was impossible. She swallowed the words of persuasion. In the end, she didn't defend the old madam and followed the order to chase out. Chin Han and Chin Yu were very embarrassed after receiving the order. They didn't want to be sandwiched between the old madam and Chin Yining. Chin Yu could suppress his temper and emotions, but Chin Han was an explosive temper. He liked to fight for injustice. He began to feel disdain when he heard the old madam's order. But he couldn't show his displeasure on his face because the head eunuch had had to deliver the decree. Just like that, he persevered all the way to the forest returning tower, and was successfully rewarded. Chin Han bowed and bowed Chin Han and politely. Sent and politely and politely. When he reached a place where there was no people, he went to a place, and politely, he went and looked and politely to bowed and politely sent bowed. Sent bowed and politely. After, bow bowed, and politely. Bow bowed immediately came forward with a smile and presented a stack of banknotes with both hands. My lady invites you to have tea. When the head eunuch saw the stack of banknotes, he beamed with joy and repeatedly bowed to thank him. In addition, Chin Yining's attitude towards him was very polite. The head eunuch felt very comfortable and knew what to say when he went back. After sending off the head eunuch, Chin Yining took Bao Baoed and returned to the backyard of the Bao Baoed. Chin Han and Chin Yu were talking with the Sun clan in the room. The old madam means that it's not convenient for aunt to live outside. It's better to have more servants in the manor to take care of her. If aunt likes peace and quiet, the old madam can also exempt you from the morning and evening routine. You can just stay in Xingning Garden to recuperate. No one is allowed to come and disturb you, Chin Yu said with a smile. When the Sun clan heard this, they were somewhat moved. She was Qin Huayuan's wife. Now that Qin Huayuan had been conferred the title of Marquis of Anping, she had also become a first-rank Madam of Anping. Her title was even higher than the old madam's. At this moment, she really wanted to go back. On one hand, there would be many congratulatory and social events in the coming days. It wouldn't be good if she wasn't at home. On the other hand, she wanted to be able to raise her head in front of the old madam. She knew that the old madam didn't like her. Now that her title was higher than hers, what else could the old madam do? However, the Sun clan didn't immediately make a decision. Instead, they glanced hesitantly at Chin Yining. She didn't know when it started, but she would ask for Chin Yining's opinion whenever something happened. She was very dependent on her daughter. Perhaps it was because Duchess Ding and Qin Huayuan had told her this many times that she had formed a habit. When Qin Yu and Qin Han saw the Sun clan looking at Chin Yining, they understood who had the authority to make the decision here. His two cousins didn't have much contact with Chin Yining. Qin Yu's impression of Chin Yining came from his eldest grandmother, the Yao clan. Qin Han was a bit better. Apart from listening to his wife talk about matters of the inner residence when they chatted, he also taught Qin Yining the rules of the estate when she returned to the capital. Just as Qin Yu was hesitating about how to speak, Qin Han said, "Sister Yi, do you want to go back?" Qin Yining had always been grateful to Qin Han. On the way back to the capital, it was Qin Han who told her about the estate in private and taught her the rules so that she wouldn't make a fool of herself. It was because of this that she was able to pass the hurdle of greeting when she first returned to Qin Manor and quickly adapt to the new environment. Because of this, Qin Yining was closer to Qin Han. When she spoke, she restrained her sharpness and said with a smile, "It must be difficult for my two cousins to be assigned this task." Qin Han and Qin Yu were both sensible people. As soon as they heard this, they knew that she didn't intend to go back. Qin Yu was a bit displeased. Fourth sister, are you planning to live outside with eldest aunt? Forgive me for saying too much, but fourth sister is still an unmarried woman. It's not good for her to be so domineering. Without waiting for Qin Yining to speak, Qin Han said disapprovingly, now you're saying that fourth sister is a woman. Why did you push her out during the peace talks? As the eldest cousin, you didn't speak up for her. You. Qin Yu glared at Qin Han. Qin Han glared back, not to be outdone. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. Eldest cousin, second cousin, don't be angry. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with the two cousins. You two know how I left home that day. If I go back like this, my mother will be wronged. Qin Yu couldn't help but frown. You mean to say that we have to negotiate before we can go back? That's not it. I don't want to make things difficult for my two cousins. When you go back, tell grandmother that my mother's health is not good. After entering the palace, she has been frightened repeatedly. What she needs now is peace and quiet. Although Xingning Garden is quiet, it's not as quiet as my business outside. When my mother gets better, as a granddaughter, I will naturally take my mother back. Hearing that, Qin Han felt satisfied in his heart. He patted Qin Yining's shoulder with a big smile and said, good job. Qin Yu rolled his eyes angrily. Qin Han had always had such a sharp temper. He was already used to it. He just didn't expect that a little girl like her could be so unafraid of trouble. There was actually someone who praised her. Although old madam's methods were not honorable, shouldn't a woman pay attention to the 3 obedience and 4 virtues? It was no wonder that second sister-in-law was so spoiled by Qin Han that she didn't even touch a needle and thread. Forget it. Qin Yu stood up, brushed his robe, and bowed to the Sun clan. Since eldest aunt has made such a decision, the two of us should take our leave and go back to report to old madam. The Sun clan was a little nervous, but in the end, they didn't have any intention of rebelling against Qin Yining. After Qin Yining sent his two cousins away, the Sun clan immediately pulled Qin Yining and said, Sister Yi, aren't we making things difficult for your father by staying here? Tell mother, what happened that day? Why are you obstructing me and not letting me go back? Chapter 131. Qin Yining knew that Sun clan was suspicious and would definitely ask, so he wasn't in a hurry to answer. He first smiled and brought over a cup of warm honey black tea. Then, he placed his hands next to Sun clan's hands and comforted her. Mother, don't be anxious. Father has tacitly allowed us to live here, so he won't feel embarrassed. Besides, we're only going back a few days late. There won't be any major problems in the Fu. It's not that I don't want you to go back, but if you want to go back, we have to go back with dignity. Dowager Duchess will have to give us an explanation. If we go back with a proper reason, we'll feel proud. Qin Yining's voice was soft and unhurried, making people feel comfortable. The aroma of the black tea and honey lingered around the nose. Sun clan couldn't help but take a bite. It was warm and sweet in the mouth, warming her heart. Looking at Qin Yining's gentle smiling face, Sun clan sighed and said, Sister Yi, tell mother the truth. When I was dragged out to be beheaded that day, did Dowager Duchess make things difficult for you? It can't be considered as making things difficult. Qin Yining smiled. He didn't want to expose his mother, so he vaguely said, Mother also knows Dowager Duchess's temperament. Besides, she's the head of the family Qin. What she has to consider is not only the safety of one person, but also the interests of the whole family. It's already been a while, but you're still speaking up for your grandmother. Sun clan sighed and took Qin Yining's hand and patted it. Your grandmother is very snobbish. In order to curry favor with that bitch Chao Yuqing, she didn't even care about her face. I've been thinking about it carefully these past 2 days. His Majesty suddenly wanted to kill me. When the news reached home, you all must have been shocked. In fact, even if you don't say it, I can guess that Dowager Duchess must be afraid of getting into trouble and can't wait for me to die. Sun Clan's tone was angry, but Qin Yining could see that Sun Clan wasn't as arrogant and domineering as before. Although she was also angry now, she wouldn't blindly make a scene to vent her emotions. Sure enough, the cruel reality was the best teacher. Only by going through trials and tribulations could a person grow up quickly. Mother, don't be angry. We just need to take one step at a time. As for what others think and do, it's not something we can control. We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. Anyway, no matter when and where, Mother just needs to remember that your daughter will definitely stand on your side. Sister E. The members of the Sun Clan looked at Qin Yining's beautiful face and held her hands tightly. After the careful treatment of Bing Tang, the scars on Qin Yining's hands had faded a little, and the calluses had also thinned. At least at first glance, one would not be able to tell that her hands were different from the hands of ordinary ladies. However, when the Sun Clan held her hand, his fingertips could still feel the thick calluses and scars on her slightly rough palm. Thinking back to Qin Yining's coldness and suspicion when she returned to the Fu, the Sun Clan could only feel regret. Qin Yining didn't know the complicated feelings of the Sun Clan. She casually flipped through the gold, silver, and other rewards placed on the round table. She took out a black lacquered wooden box and opened it. Inside was a colored glass snuff bottle with an exquisite drawing of an aureole. It looked very lively and festive. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then smiled and instructed Bing Tang, "I'll have to trouble you to go out and buy me a snuff bottle. It has to be similar to this one." Bing Tang asked curiously, "Don't you have it? Why does Miss still want to buy it?" "This is a reward from the Emperor and Empress. I wouldn't dare to use it carelessly. It wouldn't be good if it gets damaged." Qin Yining smiled lightly and casually put down the box. She didn't seem to care much about it. Bing Tang didn't ask any more questions and quickly went out to buy the snuff bottle. Qin Yining instructed Song Lan to put away the imperial gift properly. Then, he chatted with the Sun Clan about some cheerful topics. Just talking about Qin Huayuan's love for the Sun Clan was enough to make the Sun Clan happy. At the same time, in Ci Shao Garden, when the Dowager Duchess heard Qin Yu and Qin Han's reply, she was so angry that she immediately smashed her teacup. What a wild girl. She's the one who instigated her mother to be bad. Fine. I'll pretend that I don't have such an unfilial granddaughter. That idiot from the Sun Clan likes to be wild. Let her be wild outside. Don't tell me that my son needs someone to serve him. Naturally, there will be more beautiful young women with a higher status than that stupid woman to serve my son. The Dowager Duchess was so angry that she didn't consider the situation. Her words directly made the faces of the young ladies on the side turn red. Second Madam frowned unhappily and waved her hand, indicating for Third Miss to take her cousins out. Third Madam stood beside the Dowager Duchess and tried to persuade her. Although they tried to persuade her, Second Madam and Third Madam couldn't stand the Dowager Duchess' way of doing things. As daughters-in-law, this matter now fell on the Sun Clan. What if it fell on them in the future? The Sun Clan had good fortune. Their maternal family had collapsed, but at least they had a filial and capable legitimate daughter. Moreover, the first master wasn't a muddle-headed person. If they were the ones in charge, they didn't know what would happen. Not to mention their husband's personality, but the daughter they raised didn't have Qin Yining's ability and courage. 7 or 8 days passed like this. The Qin Manor's inscribed board with the words Marquis of Anping's Manor written by the Emperor had been replaced. The craftsman's gate also started work on erecting an archway for the Sun clan in front of the family Qin's gate. It was a supreme honor for a woman to be praised by the emperor to erect an archway. Moreover, how many first-rank titled madams were there in the entire Dian? Now that spring had arrived, the weather was gradually warming up. The upper-class women and wealthy families who were preparing for the winter began to move about diligently. During this period of time, invitations for the Sun clan and Qin Yining to attend all kinds of banquets came one after another. At first, the Dowager Duchess said that the Sun clan wasn't feeling well. However, if she kept refusing like this, it would appear that the Dowager Duchess was obstructing them. If she wanted these people to send the invitations to Guilin Lu, it would appear that she, as a mother-in-law, couldn't tolerate her daughter-in-law. Thus, she chased out the proper mistress of the Marquis of Anping's manor. In reality, the Dowager Duchess had already heard several rumors. Each of them speculated that she couldn't tolerate her daughter-in-law and wanted to fight for power with her daughter-in-law. The Dowager Duchess got up early in the morning and instructed Mammy Qin to go and persuade Qin Yining and the Sun clan to return. However, in the morning, Mammy Qin also returned in low spirits. The Dowager Duchess finally couldn't take it anymore. She called Qin Huaiyuan, who had just returned home from the Yamen, to come over and reprimand him. However, Qin Huaiyuan spoke with conviction. In the end, it wasn't this son who drove my wife and daughter away. This son is busy with court affairs and doesn't have the heart to manage these matters. Mother should share this son's burden. You mean you want me to go invite people? The Dowager Duchess was flabbergasted. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, Mother is an expert in managing the family. How could this son understand these matters? Mother should make the decision. After he finished speaking, he hurriedly took his leave and went to the study in the outer courtyard to see his aides. The Dowager Duchess was so angry that her teeth itched. In the end, it was more important to preserve her face. She could only instruct Mammy Qin, prepare the carriage. I want to personally go to Guilin Lu. I don't believe that damned girl can still be arrogant when she sees me. Mammy Qin complied and hurriedly instructed people to prepare the carriage. Chapter 132. Young lady, this servant was just chatting with someone outside. Bing Tang excitedly entered the room and said, this servant went to take a look and went to the front to ask about young lady's whereabouts. It was Mammy Qin. Young lady is really good at scheming. Old madam really came in person. How could she not come in person? Qin Yining played with the brand new snuff bottle in his hand and said with a smile, these 2 days, the people who came to call us back have never stopped. Something must have happened in the Fu again. Old madam needs my mother to support the front, and I'm afraid she can't handle it herself. Bing Tang, go and invite madam to come here. Let Song Lan receive the distinguished guests outside. Yes. Bing Tang's big round eyes were full of excitement as she ran out. Not long after, Mother Jean, Kai Ju, and Kai Lan accompanied the Sun clan into the door. The Sun clan sat down beside Qin Yining and smiled, is there something good? Just now, I saw that Bing Tang girl smiling so happily, as if she had picked up a big gold ingot. Qin Yining stood up and went to bring some fruits and pastries for his mother. He also brought a bowl of hot tea and gently placed the blue and white porcelain bowl beside the Sun clan's hand. The people outside said that old madam brought her personal attendants and condescended to come in person. The Sun clan's hand that was holding the tea paused. They hadn't seen each other for many days. Now that they suddenly heard that old madam was coming, the Sun clan actually felt nervous. Qin Yining saw through the Sun clan's thoughts and smiled, Mother, don't be nervous. You just have to do things according to your heart. Moreover, you have never let old madam down in any way. That's right, it was old madam who didn't care about her feelings at all. When something happened at Duke Ding Fu, old Madam's first thought wasn't to comfort her, but to divorce her. After that, she had never stopped suppressing her. After Madame Chow married into the family, the abuse became even more severe. The Sun clan's originally wavering heart became firm once again. "Madam, young miss, old Madam is here." Song Lan, who was standing in the corridor, replied with a smile. The members of the Sun clan and Qin Yining looked at each other and stood up to greet him. Old Madam looked at the fresh and elegant backyard of Guilin Tower and her heart was filled with anger. As soon as he entered the courtyard with white walls and black tiles, the tiles on the ground were clean and tidy. A tall osmanthus tree stood at the side. If it was autumn, the entire tree would be filled with the fragrance of osmanthus. Walking up the stairs, he saw that there was a light blue bamboo curtain embroidered with 100 butterflies hanging on the door of the main room. 2 green jade gourds were pressed against the corners of the curtain. As the curtain moved, the light blue tassels below moved in a lively and elegant arc. Just by looking at the curtain, he could feel that the person living inside was definitely a young woman, and that the person living inside was definitely in a very happy mood. Old Madam thought about her belly full of anger these past few days and then looked at the smiling Sun clan and Qin Yining who lifted the curtain to welcome her. She felt like she had eaten a caddy of Chinese gold thread. "Old Madam, you actually came in person. You really bring light to my humble shop. Please forgive us for not coming out to welcome you." Qin Yining and Sun clan saluted Old Madam. They also nodded to Mammy Qin, who was beside Old Madam, and then they helped Old Madam up the stairs. They were so polite as if there had never been any discord between them. Raising one's hand doesn't hit a smiling person. Qin Yining was so polite that Old Madam couldn't do anything. She just snorted and said half seriously and half jokingly, "If I didn't come, you didn't plan to go back, right? You were waiting for me, this old woman, to personally come and invite you back." As Old Madam spoke, she looked at the furnishings inside the room. The Arhat bed next to the window was carved with a picture of a magpie on a branch. It was even more exquisite than the picture of a magpie on a branch in the main room of her Ci Shao garden. All the furnishings in the multi-treasure pavilion were also luxurious and exquisite. The hanging light green tulle and the bead curtain were actually strung with pearls the size of a grain of rice. Old Madam couldn't help but feel a little sour in her heart. No wonder the mother and daughter didn't want to go home. Living here wasn't much worse than living in the Fu. She didn't expect that Duchess Ding, that old noob, would casually give her granddaughter Zhao Yinsi to have such a background. She didn't know how much background Zhao Yinsi had. Unfortunately, this thing was under Qin Yining's name, so she couldn't do anything about it. Old Madam unconsciously held the bead curtain in her hand. Her face was gloomy, and the greed and indignation in her eyes couldn't be hidden. Upon seeing this, Mammy Qin frowned and helped Old Madam up, for fear that she would be found out. However, Qin Yining said with a smile, "Old Madam, please take a seat. That's a bead curtain bestowed by the Emperor. Old Madam, look at the quality of the pearls, is it good?" Old Madam was so scared that she immediately withdrew her hand. If the bead curtain bestowed by the Emperor was broken, she couldn't bear the responsibility. As Old Madam sat down, she praised, "In the end, it's a gift from the Emperor. When it's hung up, the entire room becomes bright. The Emperor enjoys the riches and honor of the Emperor, so naturally, he bestows good things." On the side, Mother Jean, Kaiju, Bing Tang, and the others all lowered their heads to hold back their laughter. The Sun clan coughed to hide their laughter and brought a cup of tea for Old Madam. Then, they brought a cup of tea and sat down next to Old Madam. "Old Madam, how have you been these days? Daughter-in-law, your complexion is much better than before. Laoi has been conferred the title of Marquis, and the family has brought honor to our ancestors. Presumably, Old Madam is also in high spirits." It's a pity that daughter-in-law's body isn't good, and I was frightened. I don't have the good fortune to celebrate with old madam. Old madam looked up and down at the Sun Clan and saw that she was wearing a dark blue Rui brocade with a waistband. Her hair was neatly tied into a high bun, and she only wore a pure silver and sapphire embedded hairpin. The collar button was also the same style of sapphire embedded with 100 flowers. Although it was a morning dress, it was simple yet luxurious. Especially the pleasant smell of jasmine mixed with medicinal fragrance. It was actually this year's newest popular jasmine hair oil from the capital's Jiao Rong workshop. Jiao Rong workshop had risen overnight because its rouge and face powder had medicinal ingredients. The ratio was extremely refined, and the effect was particularly good. The jasmine hair oil used by the Sun Clan could make the dark hair more supple and also let the white grow slowly. Now, it was already sold for 50 taels of silver per jar. Now, being able to use the rouge and face powder produced by Jiao Rong workshop was already a symbol of the status of noblewomen. Old madam had gotten a small jar a few days ago. She wanted to hold a banquet before using it. It would also appear dignified. She didn't expect that the Sun Clan would actually use it as ordinary rouge and face powder on a daily basis. Where did the Sun Clan get so much money? Naturally, it was given by Qin Yining or Qin Huaiyuan. The sourness in old madam's stomach was about to materialize, and her words couldn't help but have a sour taste. What are you saying? I see that you are very happy. You use Jiao Rong workshop's rouge and face powder, wear silk and satin, and eat delicacies. You don't look like you're recuperating from an illness. Instead, you come out to enjoy. If it was someone who didn't know better, they would probably guess that you have a new patron. When the Sun Clan heard this, their faces immediately sank. It seemed that her soft-heartedness was a sign of stupidity. People like old madam didn't deserve to be soft-hearted. Before the Sun Clan could speak, Qin Yining smiled and put a plate of desserts in old madam's hand. Grandmother, eat some desserts to avoid bitterness. You! Old madam angrily glared at him. Qin Yining smiled and said, I only hate that I'm a woman. Otherwise, I would definitely rely on my own efforts to earn a phoenix coronet and robe for my mother. Now, I'm only provided with extravagant clothing and food. How can that be considered as enjoyment? Eating well, wearing well, and using well isn't the ultimate enjoyment in the world. Being glorified and envied by tens of thousands of people is enjoyment. Qin Yining's words both suppressed and praised old madam. She didn't know whether she should be angry or laugh. Old madam looked at Qin Yining and sneered, Your mother is blessed to have such a formidable daughter like you. Doesn't old madam also have the same blessing to have such a formidable eldest son? Qin Yining smiled. Old madam choked from the rebuttal. When she thought that Qin Huaiyuan didn't side with her in this matter, her anger surged. Since I've personally come here today, I think you shouldn't put on airs anymore. Quickly pack your things and follow me back. Sun Clan, you're my family's matriarch after all. Now, you're a first-rank noble lady. Could it be that you really let your husband handle all the matters of the manor's guests? Then what's the use of having a daughter-in-law like you? She was clearly mocking the Sun Clan for being unvirtuous. Sun Clan's face also darkened. Old madam's words are unreasonable. Although the family doesn't have a first-rank noble lady like me, isn't there still Mother, a first-rank noble lady? Mother is a veteran in managing the inner residence. She's been through many years of experience. Naturally, she's better at judging the situation than daughter-in-law. She knows who to befriend and who to alienate. She was secretly mocking old madam for being fickle. Old madam's face was so gloomy that water could be squeezed out of it. Sun Clan's face was also gloomy and they weren't willing to back down. Qin Yining stood to the side and silently played with his snuff bottle. The atmosphere in the room was like a layer of frost on a winter day. After a moment of deadlock, old Madam gritted her teeth and softened her voice. Sun Clan, if you return to the manor now, it'll look good for everyone. Moreover, there's still concubine Chow in the manor. Are you at ease leaving your husband in the hands of only concubine? Sun Clan's heart was bleeding, but they didn't seem to care. Daughter-in-law isn't a jealous woman. If Laoi likes, daughter-in-law can take in 8 or 10 beautiful concubines to serve Laoi. However, I don't know how old Madam will explain it to concubine Chow at that time. You stupid woman. Old Madam finally couldn't bear it anymore. She stood up and raised her hand to slap Sun Clan's face. Sun Clan's members were so frightened that they cried out in alarm. Qin Yining hurriedly stepped forward to stop her. But in the midst of the panic, old Madam's slap landed on Qin Yining's hand and sent the snuff bottle she was playing with flying to the ground. The colored glass snuff bottle made a sharp shattering sound, and a strong smell of mint filled the room. Old Madam wanted to get angry again, but Qin Yining said with a pale face, "It's over, it's over. Grandmother, you've caused a big disaster." That snuff bottle was the Empress Dowager's favorite item when she was alive. It accompanied the Empress Dowager for more than 30 years. Even the Empress had to kneel down when she saw that snuff bottle. His Majesty just rewarded it to me, yet grandmother broke it. If His Majesty finds out, how will we explain it? Chapter 133. Qin Yining anxiously shed tears and choked with unwillingness. When the imperial gift came, the emperor ordered us to use it as we wished. Such an exquisite item, we naturally took it out and used it. Old Madam broke it. Not only did she casually destroy the imperial gift, but she also blamed us for obeying the imperial edict. It's really unreasonable. Old Madam was so anxious that her forehead was sweating. 2 more white hairs were about to grow. Old Madam, that was the snuff bottle that the Empress Dowager used when she was alive. Even the Empress had to kneel when she saw it. How dare you, how dare you? Sun Clan finally recovered and covered their faces as they sobbed. What snuff bottle? I've never seen it before. I don't know what you're talking about. Old Madam snorted and calmly turned to leave. When she passed by the bead curtain, she lifted the curtain with extra caution. Mammy Qin, Ji Xiang, and Ru Yi recovered and hurriedly bowed. They followed old Madam out in a panic. The entire room was silent. The mess of the broken snuff bottle on the ground and the smell of mint snuff in the air proved the farce just now. Song Lan and Bing Tang looked at each other and quietly went to the courtyard to check. After confirming that old Madam and the others had gone far away, they couldn't help but laugh. Mother Jean helped Sun Clan to sit down and instructed Kai Ju and Kai Lan to take a dustpan to clean up the broken pieces on the ground. She smiled and said, "That day, when Miss asked Bing Tang to find a similar snuff bottle, you had already calculated this, right?" "Yes." Qin Yining smiled happily. "I didn't expect her to be even more cowardly than I expected." Sun Clan couldn't help but laugh when they thought of old Madam's fleeing appearance. The anger and grievance that filled them just now dissipated along with the laughter. However, after laughing, she was also puzzled and worried. "Sister Yi, if your father knew that you teased old Madam like this, he wouldn't like it. Don't look at how he tacitly allowed us to live here. Your father is the most filial person. If old Madam really thinks that she broke the imperial gift, and it's even something that the Empress Dowager has used before, she will be afraid when she goes back. She might even fall seriously ill." Speaking of this, the Sun Clan member frowned worriedly. "If your father asks, just say that it was my idea. Anyway, I don't have a good image in the eyes of the family Qin people. You are different. You will still have to talk about marriage in the future." Qin Yining was deeply moved. He sat beside the Sun Clan and hugged her waist, acting like a spoiled child. Mother dotes on me. Don't you care what father says about you? I'm not afraid. Your father and I have been husband and wife for a long time. It's not like we've never had a falling out before. Anyway, I don't have the backing of your landlord's family, so this is how it will be in the future. But after all, the broken item wasn't the real imperial bestowed item. If she goes back and spreads it, wouldn't you be deceiving the monarch? The Sun Clan's expression turned ugly when they thought of this. Qin Yining comforted them. If she's a little bit smarter, she won't tell anyone about today's incident. Breaking an imperial bestowed item is a crime that she can't wait to push away. Why would she spread it? If she's not smart enough, she can ask father, but my father is definitely smart enough. He'll definitely suppress this news and ask me. The Sun Clan pondered for a moment and slowly nodded. She then asked, if your father asks you, how will you answer? Your father is very smart. You won't be able to fool him when he's free. Mother, don't worry. I naturally have a way to deal with it. Qin Yining smiled and said, let's make some preparations now and set off in a while. We'll rush back before dinner and pay respects to the matriarch. When the Sun Clan heard this, she lightly pinched Qin Yining's cheek. Bad girl. You're the only one with so many wicked ideas. Mother Jean laughed. It's fortunate that fourth young miss has an idea. Otherwise, we would have been bullied into the dust. The Sun Clan thought of the days she lived after Duke Ding's estate was destroyed. If it wasn't for Qin Yining accompanying her at all times and shielding her from all of her troubles, she might have already been driven crazy. The Sun Clan's arms around Qin Yining tightened. In less than an hour, everything had been packed. Qin Yining went to the front desk to see the shopkeeper. She instructed him to send someone to inform Master Zhong that she had already returned to the estate. She then rode a carriage with her mother back to the Qin estate. When the carriage slowly passed the street corner in front of the Qin estate, they saw craftsmen and people busily working not far away. They were rushing to set up a memorial arch for the Sun Clan. When they arrived at the entrance of the estate, the original plaque of the Qin estate had been replaced with a large gilded plaque with the words, Marquis of Onping's estate, inscribed by the emperor himself. The walls had been repainted, and the black tiles had been tidied. Looking at the entrance of the estate, the entire family Qin seemed to be full of vitality. Although the emperor was an incapable ruler, having a large plaque inscribed by the emperor himself was also a supreme honor. When the Sun Clan saw the words, Marquis of Onping's estate, pride involuntarily rose in their hearts, and their backs straightened even more. Qin Yining ordered someone to pass on the message. Then, he helped the Sun Clan out of the carriage and whispered into the Sun Clan's ear, Mother is recuperating outside and hasn't recovered yet. Now that the matriarch has personally come to invite us, we can only return home out of filial piety. Mother, don't get angry when you encounter something. Just focus on recuperating and leave the rest to your daughter. The Sun Clan held back her laughter and nodded, I understand. Then, she generously leaned on Qin Yining and really looked a bit weak from her illness. At this time, the matriarch was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She pulled on Qin Huayuan's hand and said, Brother Meng, I have an important matter to tell you. Mother, please speak. The matriarch looked around and saw that there was only Mammy Qin attending to her, so she said, the snuff bottle that the emperor bestowed to Sister Yi was broken by Sister Yi today. I saw it with my own eyes. That was something that the Empress Dowager had used before. Even the Empress had to kneel down when she saw it. Say, Sister Yi, you're so careless. You don't even know how to put away the imperial gift, and you even took it out casually. Now that you've broken it, what are you going to do if the emperor finds out? If the emperor punished her, wouldn't the whole family be implicated? When Mammy Chin heard this, she couldn't help but lower her head and frown. She was already so old. She had done something wrong and wanted to find her son to think of a way to remedy it, yet she didn't tell the truth. Qin Huaiyuan asked strangely, Sister Yi isn't a person with an arrogant temper. She also has a sense of propriety. Why would she deliberately break the snuff bottle bestowed by the emperor? When the matriarch heard this, the expression on the matriarch's face became a bit stiff. She said sourly, Today, I personally went to invite your good wife and good daughter to come home. Unexpectedly, I didn't manage to invite them back and even had to eat a meal. Sister Yi had a bad temper and broke the snuff bottle. Instead, she blamed it on me. Why is my life so bitter? To have such a seed that causes trouble in the family. As the matriarch spoke, she covered her face and sobbed. Mammy Chin, who was at the side, hurriedly took a handkerchief to wipe her tears and persuaded her in a low voice. Qin Huaiyuan understood the matriarch's temperament the best. Her words were full of loopholes and were really suspicious. Qin Huaiyuan looked inquiringly at Mammy Chin. When Mammy Chin met Qin Huaiyuan's scrutinizing eyes, her gaze was somewhat evasive. It wasn't good for her to directly expose her master, but it wasn't right to hide it from Qin Huaiyuan either. When Qin Huaiyuan saw Mammy Chin like this, he was even more certain of his thoughts. Right at this moment, someone came in from outside. Replying to the matriarch, the Marquis, Madam and fourth Miss have returned. They are heading to Xi Shao Garden to pay respects to the matriarch. When the matriarch heard this, she was so scared that she hiccuped. Sure enough, it was that bitch who schemed against her. She had just complained that they refused to come back and even ate her, and in the blink of an eye, they came back. Then wouldn't she be spreading rumors? When the matriarch raised her head and met Qin Huaiyuan's suspicious gaze, her heart turned cold. She couldn't help but curse, that bitch actually has the guts to swagger back to pay respects. Chapter 134. Upon hearing this, old madam looked at Qin Huaiyuan in disbelief. She had just cried for a long time and didn't squeeze out many tears, but in the blink of an eye, her tears were streaming down. You unfilial son, you've made up your mind to help your wife bully me. Now you're saying that I'm going to call them back. Didn't I listen to you? If you're willing to give the order to call them back, I don't believe that they won't listen to you since one of them is your wife and the other is your daughter. You're siding with outsiders, and now you're saying this kind of words to block my heart. You've really forgotten your mother after marrying a wife. What sin have I committed? Qin Huaiyuan helplessly frowned. As a son, he knew old madam's temper the best. If she didn't have a reason, she would cry and make a scene. She was facing her own family members, and no matter what considerations they had to give in to old madam in the end. Especially him, he couldn't bear to see his mother's body hurt from crying. Qin Huaiyuan could only persuade her softly, Mother's words are too serious. Son is just stating the facts. You gave the order, and they came back. How good is this? Good. I'm almost angered to death by your wife. Is this a good thing? Qin Huaiyuan helplessly said, Mother, you've forgotten that it was you who made the decision for Son's marriage. Moreover, the Sun clan didn't do anything wrong after marrying into the family. Didn't do anything wrong. She can't give birth to a legitimate son, and you call that didn't do anything wrong? She already gave birth to a legitimate daughter. This proves that it's not that she can't give birth. Qin Huaiyuan's hidden pain was poked, and his patience was about to be worn out. Old madam saw Qin Huaiyuan's sunken face and realized what she had said in a moment of desperation. In fact, old madam also had some doubts about whether Qin Huaiyuan had a problem, but after all, her son was a person with strong self-esteem. She didn't want to ask more and hurt him. Just at this moment, a servant's announcement came from the corridor, "Old Madam, the eldest Madam and fourth Miss have returned." Immediately, the dark green curtain was lifted, and Chin Ening supported the Sun clan to enter the door. The members of the Sun clan had changed into their usual dark green plain clothes. Their hair was still tied into a bun with a silver hairpin. Chin Ening, on the other hand, was wearing a white coat and skirt. Her long hair was combed into two flat buns with a ribbon. Both mother and daughter did not wear any makeup, but their bodies exuded the elegant and pleasant fragrance of jasmine. It was the fragrance of the jasmine flower from Jiao Rong workshop. Old Madam's heart was sour and angry. In addition, she had cried just now. At this moment, she was in a foul mood. Hence, she glared fiercely at the Sun clan and turned her head away. The Sun clan was infuriated by Old Madam's actions. Just as she was about to speak, she felt Chin Ening pinch her arm. The members of the Sun clan immediately understood. They took a deep breath and suppressed their anger. Together with Chin Ening, they came forward to greet the Old Madam. Daughter-in-law greets Old Madam. Granddaughter pays respect to Old Madam. Once Old Madam gave the order, mother rushed back without caring about her health. Old Madam was so angry that her heart was beating wildly like a drum. She coldly snorted and said, "Didn't you say you weren't willing to come back? First, you lied to me and said you wouldn't come back. Now, you're back. You're clearly playing with an old woman like me." The Sun clan bit her lip and lowered her head. Her face was flushed red from anger. Chin Ening bent his knees and said, "Old Madam, please calm down. You're thinking too much. These days, Mother has been sick. She's recuperating outside because she's worried about her illness. Since Old Madam loves Mother dearly, how can we not know how to appreciate her kindness? Glib tongue, I can't win against you." Old Madam angrily slammed the table. Chin Ening pursed her lips in grievance and also lowered her head. Qin Huaiyuan pinched the bridge of his nose and said, "You two go back first. Don't disturb Mother's peace here." "Yes." The Sun clan and Chin Ening readily accepted good advice. They bowed and left. Qin Huaiyuan also bowed and said, "Mother, rest well. Son still has government affairs to deal with." Seeing that Qin Huaiyuan was about to leave, Old Madam didn't even have time to be angry. She said, "That broken snuff bottle, what do you plan to do, Mother?" Qin Huaiyuan covered Old Madam's mouth and said in a low voice, "How can Mother still dare to make a fuss about this kind of thing? Just pretend that this matter didn't happen." Old Madam's heart suddenly jumped. She only wanted to clear her name and forgot that if this matter was revealed, it would affect the survival of the entire family Qin. Old Madam nodded with a pale face. She didn't dare to make a fuss anymore. Qin Huaiyuan sighed and said, "The Emperor has bestowed many things. Moreover, the Empress Dowager also has many things. It's possible that the imperial family didn't care about this thing when they bestowed it. Besides, no one will take the initiative to ask us. You can just pretend that you don't know anything." Old Madam nodded repeatedly. She was as obedient as a child. Qin Huaiyuan bowed to Old Madam again and retreated. Seeing Qin Huaiyuan walk away, Old Madam said faintly, "Lujuan, do you think I did something wrong?" Mammy Qin had already nodded silently in her heart. However, she said, "Old Madam, you did it for the sake of the in-laws. What did you do wrong?" Old Madam shook her head and sighed. The gold and ruby inlaid in her bun swayed, reflecting the candlelight and appearing particularly dazzling. "Actually, I should have pretended that I didn't know about the snuff bottle. I shouldn't have asked Brother Mang. Brother Mang is very smart. Perhaps he has guessed something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have talked to me like that." So Old Madam regretted this matter. Mammy Qin was speechless for a moment. She could only comfort old madam with what she liked to hear. After Qin Huaiyuan left Xiaishao Garden, he didn't immediately go to the outer courtyard. Instead, he returned to Xingning Garden first. Sure enough, as he expected, Qin Yining stayed to chat with the Sun Clan after seeing them off and didn't leave. Qin Huaiyuan beat the servants. When there were only the family of 3 left in the room, he asked, "Sister Yi, did you really break a snuff bottle today?" Qin Yining nodded obediently and told him what happened today. In the end, she said, "Old madam was angry and wanted to beat my mother. I didn't expect that when I went to stop her, the thing was sent flying by old madam." Qin Huaiyuan frowned and sighed. Was that really the Empress Dowager's snuff bottle? Yes. Qin Yining smiled slyly. It was the same model as the Empress Dowager's snuff bottle. Qin Huaiyuan looked at her fox-like expression and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He figured out the cause and effect in an instant. He pointed his finger at Qin Yining's forehead. "You little girl, you're so bad. You even dared to play tricks on your grandmother." Qin Yining touched her forehead that didn't hurt at all and naughtily stuck out her tongue. "Father, please calm down. Daughter didn't want to target old madam." Presumably, what father heard about the snuff bottle was different from what daughter said. His daughter's actions were just a harmless show of strength to intimidate the tiger. "Otherwise, when you weren't at home, wouldn't my mother be at a disadvantage?" Qin Huaiyuan looked at the Sun Clan gently. The Sun Clan had long been shocked by the way father and son interacted. When they saw Qin Huaiyuan looking over, they smiled awkwardly. "This. Master, don't be angry. It was all this concubine's bad idea." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and waved his hand. "I know. This idea must have come from Sister Yi. You don't have to help Sister Yi. You're a kind and honest person, unlike Sister Yi, whose mind is full of schemes." The Sun Clan didn't know how to respond. Qin Yining snorted. "Father, are you praising your daughter?" Qin Huaiyuan patted Qin Yining's shoulder and couldn't help but laugh. Mother Jean, Kai Ju, and Song Lan also laughed. Chao Yuqing stood in the corridor and listened to the laughter in the room. Her expression was very calm as she said loudly, "Marquis, madam, this concubine specially came to pay respects to madam." The laughter in the room stopped abruptly. Qin Huaiyuan's indifferent voice was heard, "Come in." Chapter 135. The room was brightly lit, and the exquisite carousel lantern hung under the dusty sky. On the lantern, there was a vivid picture of the 8 immortals crossing the sea. The bright and vivid characters slowly rotated, sprinkling a faint halo under Chao Yuqing's feet. She couldn't help but stop and look at it for a moment. This was the main hall of Xingning Garden, the place where Qin Huaiyuan stayed the longest, except for the study in the outer courtyard. Moreover, it was with another woman. Chao Yuqing lowered her long eyelashes. After a while, she passed through the floor-to-ceiling cover and went to the side room. Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun Clan sat on the left and right side of the Ru-Yi carved Arhat bed by the window. Qin Huaiyuan leisurely drank tea. The Sun Clan's left hand, which wore a green jade bracelet, was playing with the fried pumpkin seeds on the plate. The jade bracelet on her snow-white wrist made a slight sound as it touched the low table. Qin Yining could see the Sun Clan's displeasure. He patted her shoulder to comfort her. Then he stood beside the Sun Clan and openly admired the beauty. The light green veil outlined Chao Yuqing's well-proportioned figure. Her long raven hair was tied into a falling horse bun and fixed by a golden-laid jade butterfly hairpin. Her steps were light as she walked. Her skirt was charming, her waist was graceful, her ears swayed, her lips were sweet, and her watery eyes were affectionate. She was as bright and moving as a delicate flower reflected in the water. It was said that she was already 30 years old. However, Time seemed to treat her particularly well. It didn't leave any frost on her face. It only settled the temperament of a mature woman. With a flourishing appearance and a heart full of tenderness, Qin Yining believed that few men could escape the tenderness of such a beauty. Objectively speaking, Chao Yuqing looked like Qin Yining's elder sister. The middle-aged Sun clan and Chao Yuqing looked like mother and daughter. The Sun clan naturally realized this. Her hands clenched the carved armrest of the Arhat bed. She repeatedly told herself to be calm, to be shrewd, and to endure at the right time. She couldn't continue to indulge her emotions. She warned herself several times before she forced herself to calm down. Chao Yuqing gracefully bowed. This concubine greets Marquis and Madam. I heard that Madam wasn't feeling well and was recuperating outside. I was very worried about you these days. Now that I can see that Madam is fine, I can be at ease. With Qin Huayuan in charge, and Chao Yuqing's etiquette, speech, and behavior were all correct, the Sun clan could only put on a gentle smile. Concubine Chao is too kind. Mother Jean, take a seat, pick some oranges, and serve tea. Thank you, Madam. Chao Yuqing bowed again, and then stood up with the help of her personal maidservant. Concubine Chao, please have a seat. Mother Jean brought over an embroidered stool and placed a soft and thick light blue embroidered mattress on it. Chao Yuqing smiled and thanked Mother Jean. She was born with a natural charm. When she smiled, her eyes curved, and Mother Jean almost fell into a daze. Qin Yining subconsciously looked at Qin Huayuan's expression. She saw that Qin Huayuan was only holding a teacup and taking small sips. His eyes were lowered as he observed the movement of the tender green leaves in the tea. It was as if there was no such peerless beauty in front of him. Qin Yining couldn't help but admire her father's character and willpower. But she also became more and more confused. Qin Huayuan used to have concubines, and it wasn't as if he didn't spend the night in one of them. But why didn't Qin Huayuan care about this great beauty that he could rightfully possess? Chao Yuqing and the Demon Empress were both beauties that could topple a city. Even though Qin Yining didn't think that Qin Huayuan would be like an incapable ruler who didn't love his country and loved beauties, there was no reason not to eat the meat that was sent to his mouth. But everyone knew that Qin Huayuan and Chao Yuqing didn't consummate their marriage. Qin Huayuan only supported Chao Yuqing with good food and shelter. He gave her the greatest convenience in this welfare life, but he wasn't willing to touch her. Was it because Chao Yuqing's father was Chao Guozhang? While Qin Yining was deep in thought, Chao Yuqing had already chatted with the Sun clan for a while. She then explained the purpose of her visit. A few days ago, this concubine made a wish at the Immortal Lady Temple. I asked the Lady Mother of the Chariot to bless Master and fourth young mistress' safe return and for everything to go smoothly. Now that all the difficulties have been resolved, this concubine is thinking of going to Xiangu Temple tomorrow to fulfill the vow, and at the same time conduct a few more days of peace ritual for the people in the manor. This concubine wants to ask Madam if you and fourth miss are going together. When the Sun clan heard this, they almost agreed. She hadn't seen her mother and sister-in-law for more than a month. She didn't know if the womenfolk of Ding General Manor were used to living in the Immortal Lady Temple. However, the Sun clan suddenly remembered that she was sick. If she immediately went to the Immortal Lady Temple alive and kicking, wouldn't Qin Huayuan see that she was pretending to be sick to play with old Madam? Qin Huayuan had forgiven Qin Yining, but that was because Sister Yi was too cute and was Qin Huayuan's biological daughter. She was so similar to Qin Huayuan when he was young. Qin Huayuan had high hopes for Qin Yining. They had talked and gone through thick and thin together. Naturally, he could forgive his own flesh and blood. But the Sun clan was different. She was a wife, and a legitimate wife who had no children. Now that Qin Huayuan had grown a beard and had grown older, his temperament had changed. He was certainly no longer the man who was famous in the capital when he was young. Now, Qin Huayuan was an elegant and handsome middle-aged man with an air of immortality. What Chao Yuqing saw through his face was probably that Qin Huayuan who didn't grow a beard when he was young and was known as the wise Pan. How long has Auntie known my father? Qin Yining's words brought Chao Yuqing back to her senses. She blinked and smiled, knowing each other is mutual, so we haven't really known each other for long. However, before I got married, I saw the Marquis and Madam at a palace banquet. Qin Yining nodded in understanding. In fact, he could see that Chao Yuqing liked his father. It didn't matter whether Chao Yuqing was the daughter of the Chao Guozhang or not, nor did it matter why Chao Yuqing invited his mother to live in the palace, or what role she played in all this. It was undeniable that Chao Yuqing was extremely polite and restrained in front of his father. She even catered to him carefully. This kind of catered not only to fight for his favor, but also because she truly liked him. Before Chao Yuqing got married, his father should have been in his 30s. 30 years old was the prime of a man's life. He had lost his youthfulness and was at his most handsome, mature, and stable age. It was a pity that he was old when he was born. Qin Yining smiled faintly. Recently, Auntie. Before he could finish, the carriage shook violently. The horses neighed, and then the guard scolded, "Who are you?" Qin Yining's heart trembled, and he hurriedly lifted the curtain to look outside. Chao Yuqing also lifted the curtain. Outside the carriage, they saw a group of men dressed like poor commoners. Each of them wore rags and held sticks in their hands. There were also a few people who held knives. There were more than 20 people surrounding the carriage. At this time, they were in the middle of nowhere. There were forests on both sides of the road. The road to the fairy temple was straight and clear, but there was no one passing by. Qin Yining shrank back into the carriage in fright. Seeing that Chao Yuqing was still looking outside, he hurriedly pulled her back. "Auntie, be careful and don't show your face. Did this person want to cause trouble?" With her appearance, if the mountain bandits saw her, even if they didn't have any evil intentions, they would have evil intentions. "What should we do? What should we do?" Bing Tang anxiously pulled Qin Yining. Chao Yuqing was also supported by the old mama surnamed Lu. The two of them were trembling. The mountain bandits outside the carriage had already rushed up and fought with the guards. When the sticks collided, Qin Yining heard a rough man shouting, "That woman is very beautiful. Take her back and make her the wife of the bandit chief." Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing looked at each other, and their faces were filled with fear. "At this time, we can only take a gamble." Qin Yining casually pulled out a silver hairpin from his hair and held it in his hand. "Quickly find something that can be used as a weapon. Quickly prepare it." But they have knives." Chao Yuqing also learned from Qin Yining and pulled out a hairpin to hold. Who knew that as soon as he finished speaking, several screams could be heard from outside the carriage. It was the family Qin's guards who had been beheaded outside the carriage. A steel knife stained with blood lifted the curtain of the carriage, and a rough man with thick eyebrows poked his head in. Although his face was covered by a cloth and his face couldn't be seen clearly, when he saw Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing, he couldn't hide the amazement in his eyes. TSK, this little girl is really beautiful." As he spoke, he reached out his large hand towards Qin Yining's face. Qin Yining gritted his teeth and glared at the man. The moment his hand came close, he suddenly stabbed the hairpin into it. The man was caught off guard. Not only was there a bloody hole in his arm, but there was also a cut. Blood immediately spurted out. "Ah!" The man retreated. When his companions saw that he was injured, they all laughed loudly. The man was furious. He pointed the tip of his knife at Qin Yining and cursed, "Stupid girl. You're courting death." As he spoke, he threw away his knife and pounced forward. Qin Yining used all his strength to fight with the man. Although she was strong, she didn't know martial arts. Out of the 4 women in the carriage, she was the only one who could hold up. Chao Yuqing and senior servant Lu were so frightened that their faces turned pale and their bodies went limp. They didn't even dare to move. Bing Tang's resistance was ignored in their eyes. In the end, the 4 women were still caught. Chao Yuqing was so frightened that she screamed and fainted. Senior servant Lu supported her with tears and snot. Bing Tang was a bit calmer, but his face was also pale and his body was trembling. Chapter 137. What are we going to do? Of course, we're going to kill you. We're in the business of skinning people and pulling out their tendons. When we get back, we'll teach you all a lesson. Then, we'll skin you all and make lanterns out of you. Then, we'll slice your meat and feed it to the dogs. As the man spoke, it was as if he could already see the scene that would make him excited. He laughed heartily. The bandits behind him also laughed heartily. Bing Tang's body went weak from fear, but she forced herself not to faint. When senior servant Lu, who was supporting Chao Yuqing, heard this, she finally couldn't take it anymore. Her eyes rolled back and she fell to the ground. Chao Yuqing, who had already fainted, also fell to the ground with a dull thud. That person saw that although Qin Yining's face was pale, her eyes were calm, as if she was calmer than before. She didn't show any fear at all. A large, rough hand patted her cheek. "TSK, little girl, you're not afraid at all. You should at least shed a few tears. That way, we'll be happy." Qin Yining tilted her head to avoid that person's hand. She sneered, "Aren't you all just looking for money? If you really wanted to kill us, you would have killed us in the carriage. Since you didn't kill us just now, then we're still useful. If the hostage is injured, I'm afraid it won't be easy to exchange for money. Then, we'll have wasted all of our efforts. You're really interesting, little girl. No wonder you're the daughter of an old fox." A man behind him shouted, "Why are you talking nonsense with her? Knock her out and bring her back." When Qin Yining heard this, she immediately became alert and tensed up. Even with her hands behind her back, she still didn't give up thinking about how to escape. However, that man seemed to have seen through Qin Yining's intentions. Without waiting for her to move, he chopped at the back of her neck with a knife. Qin Yining's body trembled and she fell to the ground, unconscious. She was lifted onto the man's shoulders by his arms. Bing Tang became anxious and struggled to escape. Unfortunately, her little strength was not worth mentioning in front of these people. She was also knocked unconscious. When Qin Yining opened her eyes again, she found herself in a dimly lit room. Her nose was filled with the smell of straw and firewood. The smell of damp soil mixed with the smell of mold made her suspect that she had returned to the straw shed she lived in with her foster mother when she was young. Her mouth was stuffed with rags and her hands and feet were tied with straw ropes. She looked around to find herself and Chao Yuqing in a small wooden shed. When she listened carefully, she could hear people whispering at the door to the sound of chickens and ducks. Qin Yining was certain that this place should be the woodshed of a farmer. She looked left and right but couldn't find Bing Tang and Lu Mama. She then looked at Chao Yuqing. All her valuables had been taken away. Her clothes were slightly messy. Her pretty face was pale as she lay on the ground. Her mouth was also stuffed with rags. Her hands and feet were also tied with hemp rope. Qin Yining was a little flustered. It seemed that these people were really here to kidnap them and threaten their father. Saying that he would skin them alive and pull out their tendons was just to scare them. She just didn't know if they were after money or something else. If they were after money, it would be easy. But if these people didn't have good intentions and were arranged by her father's political enemies or someone else, it wouldn't be easy to exchange them for money. Qin Yining was full of doubts and worries, but these emotions didn't affect her judgment of her surroundings. Everything on her body must have been taken away. Qin Yining moved her tied hands and feet and frowned in frustration. What should she do? Was she going to sit here and wait for death? At this moment, she suddenly heard the sound of footsteps approaching the wooden door. Qin Yining looked through the irregular gap in the door. She could vaguely tell that the person outside was dressed very luxuriously because she saw the reflection of the silver embroidery on the brocade under the sunlight. Creak. The wooden door was pushed open. Qin Yining looked at the door nervously and saw two masked men escorting a person in. When Qin Yining saw the person in the middle, her almond-shaped eyes widened in shock. It was a woman. She was wearing a royal blue plain dress embroidered with silver chrysanthemums and a pure white cloak. Her gray hair, which had turned white for many days, was neatly tied up in a big bun with a white flower in her temple. The madam walked closer and took off the rag covering Qin Yining's mouth. Qin Yining stared at her blankly and murmured, "Grandmother, why are you here?" Duchess Ding looked at Qin Yining and smiled. She lowered her head and untied the knots on her hands and feet. "Sister Yi, I'm sorry." Qin Yining's hands were held by Duchess Ding's dry and cold hands. She stood up with the help of her hands and still looked at her in disbelief. "Grandmother, what's going on?" She looked at the people behind Duchess Ding and asked, "Who are those people?" Duchess Ding was still smiling, and her shrewd eyes were shining. She looked at the expression on Qin Yining's face without a trace and then looked at Chao Yuqing, who was unconscious on the ground. "Sister Yi, do you know the Qin Tian alliance?" Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat, and then she understood something. "Grandmother, the Qin Tian alliance is a rebel that the imperial court must kill." "A rebel?" Duchess Ding sneered. "I wasn't a rebel before. Your grandfather, your cousin, and your nephew weren't rebels. What good end did they have?" Qin Yining felt sad when she thought of the tragic deaths of the men in Duke Ding's mansion. She could understand the irreconcilable hatred between Duchess Ding and the incapable emperor. But was joining the Qin Tian alliance a foolproof plan? The Qin Tian alliance was a civil organization that had recently emerged. It intended to overthrow the tyranny of the incapable emperor and restore justice to the people. It loved to fight for justice. Wherever there were oppressed and wronged people, there would be the Qin Tian alliance. Most of the people who had been oppressed by the incapable emperor and corrupt officials eventually became members of the Qin Tian alliance. Qin Yining didn't know this at first. She only knew about it when Master Zhong mentioned it when they were chatting. At that time, she thought that it was not surprising that there was such a resistance among the people because of the incapable emperor's muddle-headedness. Maybe it could get rid of the evil and bring peace to the good and save some people who had been harmed by the incapable emperor. But she didn't expect that the Qin Tian alliance had something to do with her grandmother. "Grandmother, did you?" Qin Yining swallowed her saliva and said with difficulty, "Did you do something to the Qin Tian alliance?" Duchess Ding nodded and said with a smile, "There are too many people in the world who have been harmed by the incapable emperor. He only needs to raise his arm and call for help, and countless people who have been persecuted will respond." Duchess Ding took a dagger from the man behind her and put it in Qin Yining's hand. "Sister Yi, go. Kill this bitch from the Chao family for your grandmother. If it weren't for the demon empress instigation, your eldest cousin wouldn't have had his brain forcibly seized and died to show his sincerity. Your grandfather wouldn't have been angered by the incapable emperor. There are so many abominable people in the world. Let's start with Chao. As long as you kill Chao, you will be the leader of the Qin Tian alliance. All the forces in the alliance will belong to you. Chapter 138. Qin Yining's brain was buzzing, and the dagger in her hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Looking back at Chao Yuqing, who was unconscious on the ground, it was easy to kill an unconscious woman. It was even easier than hunting in the mountains. But could she kill her? Qin Yining was not afraid of killing people. She was also angry about what happened to her grandfather's family. She hated the persecutions of the fatuous emperor and the evil empress to the Sun family and the manipulation of her father and mother. In fact, she was very supportive of the existence of the Qing-Tian alliance. But her mind, which had always been not simple, thought of many possibilities at this time. Holding the dagger, she took Duchess Ding's hand and said, "Grandmother, shall we talk outside?" Hearing this, Duchess Ding's smile fell. She looked at Qin Yining with sharp eyes, as if she was examining her. Qin Yining felt uncomfortable being stared at by Duchess Ding. She asked, "Grandmother, can't we talk outside? I have a few words to say to you alone." Duchess Ding hesitated for a moment before nodding and saying, "Come on." Then she turned around. Immediately, two members of the Qing-Tian alliance opened the wooden door for Duchess Ding. Qin Yining followed Duchess Ding to the yard. Now it was backed by the mountains, and there were fields on three sides. There were several houses scattered not far away, and there were large fields between each house. Because it was early spring, there was a little green in the distant mountains and near forests, but the cold wind was more piercing than in winter. Qin Yining followed Duchess Ding to the yard. It was far away from the guards, so she was not afraid that the conversation would be overheard. Moreover, for Duchess Ding, her safety was guaranteed. If Qin Yining did something bad to her, the people of the Qing-Tian alliance could arrive at once. When Qin Yining saw that Duchess Ding brought her to the place to talk, she felt a little cold in her heart. It seemed that her grandmother not only wanted to drag her into the water for revenge, but also didn't trust her from the bottom of her heart. "Grandmother, are the people I brought okay?" "Of course they are fine. Would I hurt an innocent little girl?" Duchess Ding sneered, "You're so concerned about your servants. Why don't you ask your sister-in-law and cousins how they are? Grandmother is very capable. Naturally, she can take good care of the women of the Sun family." Qin Yining spoke slowly. He didn't answer Duchess Ding's question. Instead, he said, "Grandmother, please forgive me for not being able to do what you said today. Granddaughter will not spread the news that grandmother is the alliance master of the Qing-Tian alliance, and I will not reveal your whereabouts. However, if you want granddaughter to work for you, granddaughter will not agree." Duchess Ding pursed her lips unhappily and said expressionlessly, "Don't you want to have your own power? Do you know how many more subordinates you will have if you become the alliance master of the Green Sky Alliance? Granddaughter is just an ordinary girl. Why would she need so much power? Others might not be able to see through it, but do you think I can't?" Duchess Ding sneered, "You are smart and ambitious enough. If I didn't know you well, I wouldn't have given you the position of the alliance master of the Qing-Tian alliance. Grandmother, if you let me kill Chao and make a contribution to the Qing-Tian alliance, will the alliance members really believe that I, a girl who hasn't reached marriageable age, will be the alliance master? Grandmother, since you said that I was smart, why did you treat me as a fool and coax me? The alliance members don't believe in me, but in my identity. My father is Grand Tutor Qin, Marquis Anping." Qin Yining said with some sadness, "I know grandmother's pain and hatred, but after all, I am still the daughter of the family Qin. I can't put the whole family Qin in the teeth of the storm because of my personal interests. I have no right to decide the fate of everyone in the family Qin. Grandmother, when you kidnapped your granddaughter today and forced your granddaughter to kill Madame Chao, could it be that you truly did not think of these things? Qin Yining looked up at Duchess Ding with tears in her eyes. I will never forget grandmother's love and care for me for the rest of my life. However, grandmother shouldn't treat me as a flag to stand on, and you shouldn't use me as a knife. Duchess Ding's expression changed a few times when she heard this. What Qin Yining said was reasonable, and her consideration was not wrong. But she hated it. She couldn't let the Sun family die in vain. She wanted to use all available resources to take revenge. Today's kidnapping plan was a chess piece that she wanted to use to tie the Qin Tian alliance and Qin Huayuan together. She wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of the demon empress sister and relieve the hatred in her heart. Sister Yi, do you still remember your grandfather's face? Do you still remember what your eldest cousin and fifth cousin looked like? Duchess Ding's tone was full of desolation. Qin Yining closed her eyes. Tears welled up in her eyes. I remember. I won't forget it for the rest of my life. Then, why don't you want to avenge them? Duchess Ding's voice suddenly became sharp. Qin Yining said in a deep voice, I want to, but I know I can't. I can't drag the whole family Qin to die with me. And I can't let my father be restrained by others. Duchess Ding looked at Qin Yining with complicated and helpless eyes. All her emotions gradually condensed into tears in her eyes. But she didn't cry. Instead, she suddenly smiled. Sister Yi, if you don't want to kill Chao Yuqing, the Alliance's members will kill you. If the Alliance members want to kill you and your maidservant, I can't do anything about it. Grandmother, Qin Yining suddenly looked up at Duchess Ding and incredulously looked at the elder who had been giving her warmth and love since she recognized her ancestors. Her grandmother, who had once been willing to speak for her, who had once given her the Zheoyunzi as a gift, who had once been shrewd and fair, was now blinded by hatred and didn't recognize her relatives anymore. Grandmother, you want to kill me? It's not me who will kill you, but them. If you don't agree to be their leader and know so many secrets, will they spare your life? Duchess Ding looked at Qin Yining and said, Chao Yuqing's death is not regrettable. If you kill her, you will be loved and respected by all the people of the Qin Tian alliance. Isn't that enough for you? Qin Yining sighed softly and looked up at the blue sky. I don't care about worldly possessions, nor do I care about being respected and respected. What I want has always been very simple. I just want my family to be safe. Although I'm stupid and can't do anything for my family, at least I know what I can't do. Grandmother, please forgive me for not being able to promise you this. Duchess Ding stared at Qin Yining. She clenched and unclenched her fists, as if she was suppressing her anger. Thinking of Duchess Ding's hatred and difficulties, Qin Yining's heart softened. He carefully stepped forward and was about to persuade her. Suddenly, he heard a scream behind him. The man's scream was far more terrifying than the woman's. A man walked quickly to Duchess Ding, pointed to the wooden door not far away, and said breathlessly, Oh no, Chao ran away. 2 of our brothers guarding the door died. Ran away. Duchess Ding was stunned. Their hands and feet were clearly tied tightly, and there were 2 brothers guarding the door of the woodshed. Who on earth was so ruthless that they could kill 2 people without anyone noticing and rescue them? Duchess Ding was also shocked by Chao Yuqing's aggressive approach. Seeing Qin Yining's eyes, she immediately understood what she meant. Qin Yining wanted her to take her hostage. Duchess Ding had mixed feelings. She intended to use and threaten Qin Yining, but Qin Yining wanted to protect her. Without thinking too much, Duchess Ding immediately hugged Qin Yining with one hand and took the knife from the man beside her with the other. She put it on Qin Yining's white and slender neck and shouted, Stop. Otherwise, I'll kill her. Chao Yuqing pulled the sword out of one person's chest and looked in the direction of Qin Yining and Duchess Ding with a blank face. She sneered, "You really have a deep relationship with your granddaughter. You've really opened my eyes. You flatter me. Miss Chow is actually a spy for the incapable emperor. You've really opened my eyes. I wonder if your father, your mother, and your sister know Miss Chow's identity." Duchess Ding was calm and composed. She put the knife on Qin Yining's neck and led people out of the courtyard. Qin Yining was so frightened that he shed tears. He struggled and shouted, "Let me go. I'm filial to you in vain, but you treat me like this. I was wrong about you. Shut up. You're just a dog of the incapable emperor. How dare you talk about filial piety with me? If you're filial, why didn't you kill her just now?" Duchess Ding endured the heartache and hit Qin Yining on the shoulder with the handle of the knife. After Qin Yining screamed, she pointed the blade at Qin Yining's neck again. Chapter 140. Chao Yuqing saw that Qin Yining's face was covered with tears. She was so nervous that her face was pale. Her slender hands were holding one of Duchess Ding's arms, but because the cold blade was right beside her neck, it seemed that she would immediately bleed if she moved an inch forward. Qin Yining didn't dare to move at all, and her face was extremely gloomy. As early as when Qin Yining refused to kill her, she concluded that Qin Yining was not Duchess Ding's subordinate. Now, looking at Duchess Ding's ruthlessness to her, Chao Yuqing was even more sure that Qin Yining had nothing to do with the Qin Tian alliance. If it were any other girl in the Qin family who was being held hostage at this time, Chao Yuqing would not care about her life and death. She would directly order people to rush up and kill the rebels. But the hostage was Qin Huaiyuan's most beloved daughter. Qin Huaiyuan had no children. Obviously, he loved his legitimate daughter very much. She was devoted to Qin Huaiyuan. If Qin Yining died at this moment, even if she didn't kill her, Qin Huaiyuan would hate her. Then, wouldn't there be an insurmountable gap between her and Qin Huaiyuan? It turns out that such a loyal person as Duchess Ding can be ruthless. I don't know that you implicated innocent people for your own selfishness and wanted to kill your own granddaughter. If Duchess Ding knew it in the netherworld, what would she think? Chao Yuqing's hand, which was holding the sword tightly, had turned white. You people of the Chao family are the least qualified to say this. Duchess Ding gnashed her teeth and wished she could rush forward and eat her flesh. The knife in her hand moved a little closer to Qin Yining's neck. "Get out of the way and let us out. Otherwise, I will kill her. At worst, another young lady will be buried with us. It won't be a loss for our Qin Tian alliance." Qin Yining cooperated and raised his head to scream. He sobbed, save me, I don't want to die here." Chao Yuqing looked at Duchess Ding coldly. She slowly raised her left hand and stepped back step by step. The silver-masked spy behind her also stepped back and made a path in front of the courtyard door. Qin Yining secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She grabbed Duchess Ding's hand harder and motioned for her to leave quickly. Duchess Ding immediately escorted Qin Yining and ran out with the remaining 6 members of the Qin Tian alliance. Seeing this, Chao Yuqing hurriedly took people to chase after them. But when she saw Duchess Ding pulling Qin Yining and running away, the knife was still on the girl's slender neck and the blood could be vaguely seen. Chao Yuqing didn't dare to chase after them. She was afraid that Duchess Ding would really kill Qin Yining. Running along a path lined with wooden fences on both sides, they turned a corner and saw 5 horses hiding behind a haystack. Duchess Ding had ordered people to hide them here a long time ago. "Get on the horses, quick!" Duchess Ding urged in a loud voice. The men immediately obeyed the order, 1 man on 1 horse or 2 men in a team. At this time, Chao Yuqing had already caught up with them. Duchess Ding reprimanded, "Don't come over." She tightened the knife in her hand. Chao Yuqing could see the madness and determination in Duchess Ding's eyes. She hesitated and didn't order people to come forward. In the time of a breath, Duchess Ding pushed Qin Yining to the ground. She turned around and took a man's hand and jumped on the back of a horse. The 5 horses immediately galloped on the official road. Go after them. Chao Yuqing waved her hand, and the people behind her immediately chased after them. Qin Yining was lying on the ground. Her palms and elbows were bruised. She was crying and trembling all over. Chao Yuqing arrived in front of her in a few steps. Seeing that the pine hairpin in her hair was late and she was in a sorry state, crying like a pear blossom in the rain, she sheathed her sword and helped her up with both hands. She asked softly, "How are you?" Qin Yining looked at Chao Yuqing with tears in her eyes. Her red eyes and nose made her look even more pitiful against her white and tender skin, which was as white as fresh snow. Chao Yuqing lifted her chin to check the wound. Her snow-white collar was stained red with blood, and there were 2 cuts on her jade neck. Obviously, she had scratched her skin when she was nervous. At this time, it was no longer bleeding. Fortunately, it's not a big deal. Chao Yuqing sighed and patted Qin Yining's shoulder. Ignoring the fact that she was Qin Huayuan's most beloved daughter, Qin Yining's face was very similar to Qin Huayuan's when he was young. Chao Yuqing couldn't bring herself to harden her heart. She only felt that this girl was brought out by her own scheme, and she was innocent enough to go through all of this. Concubine Chao, you. Qin Yining sniffled, then said, "You're so good at martial arts. Are you really the Emperor's secret agent that my maternal grandmother said you were?" Chao Yuqing nodded. Qin Yining asked again, "Last time, when the assassins tried to assassinate the Emperor and my father, I saw a silver-masked man come to the Emperor's rescue. There was an extremely skilled woman among them. Was that you?" "Yes." Chao Yuqing calmly nodded again. Qin Yining's feelings towards Chao Yuqing became incomparably complicated. In the end, she said, "Then my father knew about your identity from the beginning?" Chao Yuqing raised her eyebrows and said with a smile like a flower, "Why do you say that?" "Because you didn't hide your identity in front of me today." Qin Yining lowered her head and used her sleeve to wipe her tears. "I really didn't expect maternal grandmother to be like this." It was as if her tears couldn't be wiped clean, so they fell down again. Seeing her cry so pitifully, Chao Yuqing no longer had any doubts in her heart.